Probably. What should we do, Master?
That's right, although I want to quickly meet up with Yue and them. To begin with, we came here to look for the Age of God's magic. It's possible that this is somehow related to that. We can't afford to miss clues. Vertical bar.
Fu Mu, that's right. Well then, let's chase after him.
With Hajime's words, Teo nods once and flaps her wings to land on the ruins. After unloading Hajime and Aiko, she reverted back to human form, and she noticed the dirt on her back. With lowered eyebrows, she took out new clothes from the treasure warehouse. Hajime also noticed his state and pulled out some extra clothes from the treasure warehouse and finished changing quickly.
Puve made you dirty.
The cause was Aiko. She apologized, and her small frame became even smaller with shame. As a woman, it's unbearably shameful to have vomited on another person's clothes. Hajime and Teo also understood that there was no helping it. They wanted to tell her not to mind it, but it wasn't such a simple thing to do. Anyways, with the little exchange from a while ago, Aiko had accepted her feelings. Therefore, she's begun to think about various things about Hajime in particular. However, it would be a problem if she stayed curled up forever. Hajime quickly changed the topic. Seni, sorry for making you tag along. Though I don't know what will happen, we need to make sure of that bald guy's identity.
Vertical bar Y, yes, understand. P11 follow along with Nagumo-kun.
Hajime thought that there was a strange power and heat from those last words she spoke, but he daringly pretended not to notice and stepped into the place where the bald man had disappeared. The bald man's figure is shown once in a while as they advance through the ruins, and after 5 minutes of walking, they finally reached their destination. The bald man stood quietly while looking straight at Hajime's group. "Who are you? What do you want with us?" The bald man did not answer Hajime's question, however, he did point silently with his finger. Although the place was just a heap of rubble, the old man's glance seems to be telling them to advance. Hajime, who judged that even if he questioned him, he wouldn't be getting any answers, he nodded at Teo and them and went towards the location. Then, at that moment, the rubble began to levitate and the ground underneath it began to shine faintly. If you looked, one of the crests of the great labyrinth was carved there. "You're one of the liberators?"
You're one of the liberators?
As Hajime voiced his question, simultaneously the light that the ground emitted wrapped Hajime and them. And in the next instant, Hajime's group were standing in a completely unknown strange space. It wasn't that big. The room was painted lustrously black. A magic formation was drawn in the center, and there was an antique book on the pedestal by its side. It appears that they've suddenly reached the final room of the labyrinth. Hajime and them walked towards the magic formation. Hajime grabbed Aiko's hand, who had a floating over her head, and led her. While nodding to Teo for a moment, they stepped into the magic formation. Then, it wasn't the usual feeling. Their memories were being examined. There was a sense of something going deeper inside, and the three people instinctively let out a groan. It was a very uncomfortable sensation. For a moment, they thought it was a trap, but in the next moment, it completely cleared up. And, where they recognized as people who's completed other labyrinths, the knowledge of magic was implanted directly into their heads. Spirit magic?
Vertical bar, you moo. It appears to be magic that can directly interfere with Soul's vertical bar.
Vertical bar, I see. The reason how Marady's soul survived and was directly implemented into a golem was this. To the experience of knowledge being carved directly into the head suddenly, Aiko was crouched down holding her head. After Hajime nodded with a consent face, they approached the pedestal by the side and picked up the book. It appears that the contents were notes written by Rouse Byrne, pronounced Ban, who was the founder of the vertical bar Kamiyamaj Vertical Bar Great Labyrinth. It explained practically the same thing that Oscar Orpus had the Liberators exchanges up until he died at Vertical Bar Kamiyama. However, because Hajime wasn't interested in it, he quickly skipped through it. He didn't care about Rouse Byrne's life. Why did he only leave himself with an image body? He probably could have lived like Myra Day by using spirit magic, although the reason was explained during the confession he was through, as in done with the subject. And, The last section was describing the conditions to capturing the labyrinth. According to it, when the image body of Rouse Byrne appears as the guide, it would mean that you've pretty much been accepted. Because the image body required at least 2 or more proofs of capturing great labyrinths, also having no faith in God or overcoming some kind of influence that God's power acted on in order to appear. In other words, it appears that vertical bar Kamiyama's vertical bar concept was to possess a firm will that wouldn't bow down to God. That was probably it, but originally, if you challenged the proper route, it may have been possible to be accepted by the will. Aiko had been accepted, although she received a lot of teachings from the church for a long time, because her feelings for her students were much higher than faith, or maybe it was enough that she had the judgment to go against the church. For the people of this world, it was a rather harsh condition, but it was an easy condition for Hajime and them. At last, Aiko, who recovered from the shock of obtaining Age of God's magic, is encouraged, and they took the ring from the pedestal along with the book. They then quickly left the place. Once again, Rouse Byrne's crest shined, and they returned back to their original place. Sensei, are you all right?
Yes, somehow, even so. Such amazing magic, certainly. If there's such incredible magic, then there might also be magic that sends us back to Japan, vertical bar.
Aiko nodded as she consented and was massaging her temple. Her expression was of someone who was tired from the rough events that developed within several days and had finally ended. She loosened up when the possibility of returning was truly felt. Well then, we know the place where the magic formation is now. Let's quickly join up with Yue in them vertical bar.
Vertical bar A. That's right. The kingdom is being attacked. Right, I hope everyone's safe.
With a worried expression, Aiko clenched her chest as she prayed. Then they began to descend from the mountain. Though I say that, the only way down from vertical bar, Kamiyama's vertical bar, to the kingdom was to jump through the lift. Aiko's scream was echoing as she experienced free-falling. Hajime and Teo are through, though. With Aiko on his shoulder, Hajime and them landed on the ground and, disregarding the flames and screams of the kingdom, which Aiko had a skeptical expression towards, and they decided to first go to where Coyote and them were. And what they saw when they joined up, with a sword thrust through the chest, Kaori's figure had already ceased breathing. Going back in time a little, precisely when Ririana and them arrived in the royal palace.
Shh. Just what is?
Towards the unpleasant sound of glass being broken, Shizuku Yegashi, who was sleeping in her room, quickly jumped into alert mode and got out of her bedsheets while grabbing onto her black katana, which was beside her pillow. It was clearly the movements of a person who continues being cautious of their surroundings even while resting. For a while, Shizuku hid her breathing with a stern expression and was ready to draw her katana at any moment. However, there were no abnormalities within her room, so she leaked out a sigh of relief. The reason why Shizuku was releasing this kind of alertness was because over the past several days, there were absolutely no signs or sightings of Ririana or Aiko. Even for some time before that, she noticed a sense of incongruity within the royal palace. On that day, the day when Aiko returned, she disappeared after announcing that she had something important to tell them at dinner time. Due to this, Shizuku suspected that something bad had happened to Aiko in order to silence her. Naturally, she searched for the two missing people's whereabouts, though they were told that Aiko and them were just being questioned by the head of the church, Ishtar, at the main temple. She wasn't allowed to meet them directly. In addition, they even forcefully avoided her by declaring to Shizuku that they would be released in a few days. Moreover, Riana's father, King Arihito, also said to not worry about them. She could do nothing but withdraw reluctantly for the time being. However, even then her vague anxiety didn't disappear. Just like now, when going to bed, she was vigilant and cautious like a spy. When Shizuku soundlessly got off her bed, she quickly straightened up her equipment in a few seconds and carefully left the room. Since Kaori decided to travel with Hajime, Shizuku was the only person in the room now. When she confirmed that there were no abnormalities within the corridor, she immediately knocked on Koki and Ryutaro's door, which was opposite to hers. The door opened immediately, and Kuki's appearance was seen. Ryutaro was in the back of the room and seemed to be fully awake. It appears that they've also woken up, like Shizuku, due to the loud sound a while ago.
Kauki, please have more caution. To suddenly open the door, wouldn't it be troublesome if it was an assailant?
Shizuku's eyebrows drop a little when Kokiki opened the door without any caution and warned him. On the other hand, Kokiki had an astonished expression. Even though he heard the breaking sound, he didn't think that there would be any immediate dangers in the corridors of the royal palace. It appears that he wasn't fully awake yet. These past several days, Shizuku had a sense of incongruity within the royal palace and about Aiko and them. Something is wrong, keep your guard up, Jay, is what she continually said, but Kuki and Ryutaro thought she was thinking too much about it and didn't take it seriously.
More importantly, Shizuku. What was that a while ago? It sounded like something was breaking.
Don't know. Anyways, let's wake everyone up and gather information. Whatever it is, Kriva got a bad feeling from it.
Shizuku only said that and turned around to knock on her classmates' doors one after another. Most of the students were gathered for an immediate meeting due to the sudden crashing sound from a while ago. Uneasily, Kuki began to raise his voice as the students began to gather in the corridor, looking annoyed that their slumber was disturbed. Then, at that time, one of the maids that was friends with Shizuku rushed in. She comes from a house which enjoys fencing and had the lineage of knights. Due to this connection, she became intimate with Shizuku.
Shizuku-sama.
Nia!
The maid called Nia ran up beside Shizuku while looking like she was in low spirits. It was a shadow of her usual dignified atmosphere. Shizuku remembered the sense of incongruity and raised her eyebrows, but it was overtaken by surprise at the information that Nia brought. Her sense of incongruity was completely blown away.
The first large barrier was broken vertical bar.
What was that?
Nia plainly tells the truth, as Shizuku instinctively asked back.
The Majinzo-ko are invading. A huge army was developed on the outskirts of the kingdom's capital, and their attack broke the large barrier.
It can't be. Just, how did they...
The information was far too unbelievable. Even Shizuku lost her calm and became stunned. The other classmates were also the same. They began to mutter noisily. The Majin-zoku's army. It was impossible for them to be able to invade the king's capital without arousing anyone's attention. With the large barrier broken, it became even harder to take in. It's unavoidable that they wouldn't be able to keep calm.
Is only the first barrier of the large barrier broken?
Within that, with a stern expression, Kuki asked Nia, the large barrier that protects the kingdom was composed of 3 pieces. The first on the outside, second, then third barrier. The third barrier was the strongest, as it covered the smallest scale of land out of the others.
Yes, for now, however, the first barrier was broken in a single blow. It's only a matter of time before they topple, though. Everything?
Towards Nia's answer, Koki suggested to everyone that they should help out in repulsing the army.
Even if just a little, we should help buy time. In the meantime, the kingdom's residents should take shelter. If the army corps and knights are prepared...
There were few that showed a resolute expression towards Kuki's words. Shizuku and Ryutaro, Suzu. It was only the front groups, such as Nadayama's party. The other classmates only had a gloomy look while turning their eyes away. They are the people who have lost their will to stand on the front lines. To suddenly challenge a huge army was only further increasing their hesitation. Then, even if by ourselves, Kuki began to resolute his heart, surprisingly, Eri Nakamura answered.
Wait, Kuki-kun. Rather than fighting on your own, I think we should equally join with Meld and them vertical bar.
Vertical bar, Eri, but vertical bar.
Vertical bar, Nia-san, the army? How much do we know about them?
They're roughly 100,000 in strength.
The students all held their breaths when they heard the number.
We can't suppress them, if it's only us. We have to oppose numbers with numbers. Even if we're stronger than an ordinary person, I think that you should go to the place where you're most needed. That is, shouldn't we cooperate side by side with Meld's group?
Although it was from the modest and docile glasses girl Eri, the strength in her eyes wasn't below that of Koki and the others, and her opinion was justifiable.
Suzu is also in favor with Irin. As expected of Suzu's Irin, those glasses aren't just for show.
Suzu, the glasses are unrelated vertical bar.
Foo. I also agree with Eri. I also might calm a little there. What about you, Kooky?
Towards the three girls' opinions, Kooky was hesitating. However, after carefully thinking over Eri's judgment, Kooky also trusted her guide a bit. In the end, he decided to join up with Meld's knights and army corps, just as Eri said. Kooky and them began to run towards where the knights and soldiers were mobilizing. No one noticed the smile in the shape of a crescent by their side. When Kooky and them reached the point which was designated as the emergency meeting place, a lot of soldiers and knights have already lined up in an orderly manner. The deputy leader of the knights, Josyuro, in case you guys didn't know it's pronounced Jose Rankaido, was on the platform and briefing them in a loud voice. While bathing in the moonlight, the soldiers were all standing still with pale and stunned expressions. They just stared at Josyuro with no vigor. Then, Jose, who noticed that Kooky and them just entered the plaza, stopped talking and beckons Kooky.
Good job. Coming here. Do you understand the situation? Yes, we've heard from Nia already. Eto, where's Meltsan?
Kooky nodded towards the welcoming words and gestion of Josyuro, and he didn't see Mile's appearance as he looked around, so he asked about his whereabouts.
Dad is dealing with a few things. More importantly, Sa, come into the center. The hero is our leader after all.
As Jose said, Kooky and them were guided into the center where the soldiers were lined up. The classmates who stayed behind. Eh? Us as well? Showed a puzzled expression. While being crowded by silent soldiers, they could do nothing but follow Kooky and them. Passing through the silence, the surrounding soldiers' expressions hardly changed at all too. Along with the knights' appearances, the feeling of incongruity began to swell up within Shizuku. It was the bad feelings that she felt ever since the beginning when she woke up. Shizuku's heart was conflicted. Unconsciously, she put power into her hand that was gripping her black kanata. And when Kauki and them were completely surrounded by the soldiers and knights, Joseo restarted his speech.
Everyone, the situation draws near. However, there's nothing to fear. There is no enemies who can stand against us. We do not know defeat. Death shall not strike us. So, everyone, welcome our hero. Right now, we exist specifically for this day. Sa, take up your swords.
The soldiers and the knights draw out their swords all together.
It's the beginning of the slaughter. Watch closely.
Josyuro took something out of his bosom and held it over his head. As instructed, not only the soldiers, but also Kooky and them paid attention. And the thing Jose was holding shot out bright light, which was comparable to Hajime's flashbang. Kooky and them who were paying attention to it were completely defenseless. They immediately avert their eyes and cover them while releasing a short scream. Their sights have been temporarily blocked out by looking straight at the light. And, in the next instant,
Ague? Gufu?
Following that, muffled screams were heard from many places. The screams were different from the ones caused by the light a while ago. It was the voice that leaked out when in agony and pain. Then immediately afterwards, there was the sound of countless people falling onto the ground dosa. Inside that, only Shizuku understood the cause. After entering the open space, her caution was raised to the maximum. She felt a sense of incongruity within Josyuro's speech. That's why, immediately when the flash of light exploded, she took up a defensive stance without being shaken, and immediately after that, she was able to block the assassin's blade with her black kanata.
It was likely the gift of training that allowed her to only rely on the presence she felt while her eyes were blinded.
And, after the light settled down, Shizuku began to look around her surroundings. As her sight began to recover, every single one of her classmates were pierced in the back by the knights and soldiers' swords, and being held down onto the ground.
What? This?
They raised their groaning voices as they were knocked down and suppressed from above. Furthermore, looking at her classmates' appearances that had swords in their backs, Shizuku's voice was stuck in her throat. It can't be. She began to imagine the worst outcome, that they were all dead, but it appears that everyone was just barely alive as they all raised out voices in agony. Although she was slightly relieved when knowing that, Shizuku turned a stern glance towards the surrounding soldiers in the unpredictable situation. A strange scene was reflected within the mesh of the crowd. and she unintentionally stiffened up.
Should I say that it was as expected? Ni, Shizuku?
What are you?
Right. While all other classmates were in critical condition on the ground, there was only one other student that was calmly standing. That student was completely different from their usual self. With a glutinous voice, they talked to Shizuku. Since their atmosphere changed too much, Shizuku's questions and doubts were stuck in her throat. In that moment, once again, a knight thrusted out their sword toward Shizuku's back.
Goo?
While being shaken up by the other person's sudden change, Shizuku was barely able to dodge and turned towards the student with an amazed glance.
You also dodged this, huh? Really? Shizuku is troublesome, huh?
What are you saying?
Further increasing in intensity, the soldiers and knights join in and thrust their swords out. Shizuku surpassed them all, then suddenly turned her gaze as her name was called out.
Shizuku-sama, help!
Nia?
There the appearance of Naya was thrown on the ground with a knight on top of her, an ass-sword about to stab into her. Shizuku immediately arrived nearby Nia's location. In an instant, with her high-speed movement skill, no rhythm, she swung her sheath at the knight who was on top of Nia and blew him away.
Nia, are you all right?
Shizuki-sama?
While supporting up Nia, who was on the ground, Shizuku looked around her surroundings in caution. Towards that Shizuku, Nia murmurs and clings both hands around her, and a dagger was stabbed into Shizuku's back.
Uncle? Nia? Why?
With an expression like she couldn't believe what happened, and grimacing over the acute pain running through her back, Shizuku looked down at Nia, who was clinging to her. Her expression no longer had the cheerful look, nor the familiarity it once held. She only returned Shizuku's glance expressionlessly back at her. Shizuku finally noticed it at last. At first she thought Nia's state was due to the kingdom being invaded. However, that wasn't it. Her atmosphere was almost identical to the expressionless knights and soldiers which surrounded her. There was definitely a different reason for this. Nia held onto Shizuku's arm and twisted it as she pinned her down onto the ground. She then attached shackles which sealed her magic just like all the other students had.
Ha 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 ha. As expected even for Shizuku. Surely you didn't think that that child would turn against you? Anan, that's probably right. That's why I purposely took time to prepare it.
With scorching pain running through her back and gritting her teeth on the cold ground, Shizuku realized that something was done to the soldiers and Nia, and although she didn't want to admit it, the disastrous scene that unfolded before her. Right now, she called out to her close friend who had an unusually unpleasant smirk on her face.
What does this mean, airy vertical bar?
Right, that person who was modest and gaiet, attentive and kind-hearted, Shizuku and their trusted companion which they shared their joys and sorrow with, it was that person, Eri Nakamura. Even while sustaining severe injuries, the students who were targeted and still alive could do nothing but have an expression filled with agony. They watched Eri's expression as she walked calmly and steadily through the soldiers in a grand manner. Rather than answering Shizuku's question, Eri began to laugh oddly in amusement as she moves towards Koki. And after taking off her glasses, she pulls on the magic sealing collar, which was placed on Koki's neck with an attractive smile.
Eri, just what goo happened?
Although not to the extent of Shizuku and them who were his childhood friends, Eri, who was one of his companions and close friend, had a far too different atmosphere around her. Kauki desperately questions her while enduring the pain of the sword which ran through his body. However, Eri had a delirious expression which contained heat within it and disregarded Kauki's question. Then, vertical bar, aha, Kuki-kun, I caught you. While saying so, she placed her lips on top of Kuki's. Within the strange silence which surrounded the area, a vivid sound of water lapping could be heard. Eri was crazily releasing her emotions, as if she had been saving it up for years towards Kuki. Although Kuki couldn't understand what was going on, he was desperately trying to shake free, but he was suppressed by several people, along with the magic sealing collar. Like all the other students, he also had his hands and feet bound as well. Moreover, his power was sapped from him, as there was a sword thrust through his body.
This.
What do you mean, Kofu, greed?
With an expression which showed she didn't understand, Shizuku vomited blood as she glared at Eri. Eri shook her head with an expression that said, "My bad," and began to talk about the reason as if she was talking to a baby.
You don't know, huh? You see, I've always wanted Kuki-kun. That's why I did what was necessary to obtain him. It's as simple as that vertical bar.
If you liked Cookie then, if you'd confessed then, this kind of thing.
Towards Shizuku's rebuttal, for a moment Aries becomes expressionless. However, she began to talk and returned to smirk immediately again.
It's useless. 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 Kauki-kun's kind-hearted, so there's no way he'd see someone else as special. Even if there's only garbage with no value around his surroundings, he wouldn't leave them alone because he's too kind-hearted. That's why, in order to make Kuki-kun mine only, I have to work hard and get rid of all the garbage in the surroundings vertical bar.
You can't even understand that? As Aries shrugs her shoulders like it was a foolish thing. Although they were being called garbage, they didn't have much anger as they were too surprised at the sudden change. For the person in front of her to have changed this much? Honestly, Shizuku looked at the girl as if this was the first time they've met.
Fufu, it was good that we were sent to a different world. In Japan, it would have been truly difficult to clean up the garbage. It was harsh living there. Of course, I won't allow us to be sent back after this war is over. Along with Kuki-kun, the both of us will continue living here forever and ever.
While looking at the laughing and giggling Eri, a sudden impossible guess came into Shizuku's mind, and she unintentionally voiced it out.
It can't be. The reason the large barrier broke so easily was because...
So you've noticed? Right, it was me. I told them to break the artifact maintaining the large barrier.
It appears that Shizuku's worst-case scenario was spot on. The reason why the Majinzuku was able to arrive at the outskirts of the kingdom without being spotted and easily breaking through the large barrier, everything was due to Eri. Eri's line of sight was interestedly looking at the soulless soldiers and knights that were standing by her side. She would probably let them do it.
How would you see that this kingdom prevents the kingdom is one of control, and unconscious that fight for our lives is tributes? Then it once been me and Koki-kun left a vertical bar.
Impossible! To contact the Majinzoku.
Kuki somehow recovered from the shock of the kiss. He muttered with an expression that showed he couldn't believe it. Eri had been training together with them at the kingdom for a long time. Inside of the large barrier, the Majinzoku wouldn't be able to get in. It shouldn't be possible to contact them. He began rebutting out poor arguments while trying to believe in Eri. However, Eri easily shatters his hopes.
The Majinzoku woman who attacked us at Vertical Bar, Orcus Great Labyrinth Vertical Bar, while leaving I quickly did it. Necromancy, that is? As I expected, the Majinzoku came to recover her body. Saul used it. From that situation, I definitely got cold feet. If what I proposed was rejected and I was murdered instead, unintentionally, I had used necromancy. I didn't want to be doubted, so I showed my necromancy to increase their impressions, ma. In the end, everything was all right.
According to Eri's words, she performed necromancy on the Majinzoku woman and left a message for the Majinzoku who would come and look for her since she didn't return. Due to this, Mikhail had known how Catalia had died. In addition, she communicated with the Majinzoku through a suitable human's dead body. When Eri's story was heard, Shizuku remembered about Eri's necromancy, and her face, which was already pale from blood loss, became even paler. Necromancy was magic which acts on residual thoughts. She concealed the fact that she could actually use it perfectly. If that's so, all the knights and soldiers who looked soulless that were surrounding Shizuku and them, the worst possible situation came to her mind when she thought about Naya, who was holding her down.
The reason for these guys' appearances is...
Of course, it's because of necromancy. Everyone is already dead.
Shizuku grit her teeth as she was told the cruel answer, and a desperate rebuttal was voiced.
That's a lie. The undead cannot talk back. They shouldn't be able to.
Look, that's because of my ability. Through some memory and thought patterns during their lifetime being added in, they became able to talk. It was my original through necromancy bind soul, I guess? Even then the sense of incongruity remains, huh? I wasn't able to carry through with everything within a day. There I began to worry about what to do. A beautifully silver-haired person. A beautifully silver-haired person. I was surprised that my plan was found out. In that instant, I prepared my resolution for various things. It wasn't certain that I was being accused at the time. Although I couldn't trust them, I could at least take advantage of them instead.
Really in such a hurry? Eri pretended to be wiping away her sweat. Most likely there might have been various processes which had to take place, but she didn't show any signs of explaining them out.
Actually, I accidentally got my hands on the king's close aid, so PM great, right? In return, he became like a dangerous drugged person, though. Thanks to that, I was able to quickly push forward my plans. Kufufu, it's all right. I won't waste everyone's deaths. Plop her properly, recycle them, and allow the Majinzoku to use them.
Originally, they only act on residual thoughts through necromancy, but if you take in the consideration of the dead person's intent while still alive, the residual thoughts would be coded in magic as they're brought back to life. They one move exactly as the magician wants. Alternatively, in a way where technicals are used to possess a corpse and make it do the magician's bidding. Their performance is normal. It's uncompared to while they're alive. They won't move unless directed, since they have no thinking ability of their own. Of course, if you give an order like, keep attacking, they'll continue. They're able to keep moving even without detailed instructions. In other words, when Nia and Joe's Uro talked with Shizuku and them, they had no ability to think it should be impossible through necromancy. That's why there was a sense of incongruity, the technique which Eri called bind soul. It's a technique which adds memory and thought patterns of thinking into the corpse through extracting the remains of the spirit. This was basically an ability to interfere with the soul. That is, Eri managed to work hard and step into the realm of the Age of God's magic on her own. Definitely a cheat. She often said that she was unsuited for necromancy. That amount of studying and genius class talent is definitely something that deserves astonishment. Alternatively, it may be due to her immense drive towards her obsession. By the way, the reason why Eri didn't immediately kill her classmates was because Bin's soul could only be used once, 8 at a time, immediately after death.
Gyu, stop it, Eri. If you do those things,
Won't forgive me? I thought you'd say so. Kuki-kun is kind-hearted, right? Besides, no matter how much garbage I clean up, that's why Pull also properly use bind soul on Kuki-kun. Pasibai be able to turn you into mine? No one else is, only looking at me, carrying out my every wish. Only my Kuki-kun.
Eri began to embrace herself and writhe her body with a nympholeptic expression. There was no longer the appearance of the calm girl who was in the book committee. All the classmates thought, she's gone insane. Bind Soul was a skill specifically made to ease and further increase the necromancer's convenience in giving out instructions. However, there is no change that a puppet is only a puppet. Once you understood that, still, she didn't seem to mind that kind of cookie.
Lies, that's a lie. Erin is... There's no way Era would do this. Surely something right. She's only being manipulated. Come to your senses, Eri.
Suzu, who was Eri's best friend, shouted out with a distorted expression while panting in pain. She was scratching at the grounds with her hands as if she was trying to crawl towards Eri. Eri turned towards Suzu and looked her straight in the eye with a smile, and she slowly walked towards the closest person who was laying on the ground, Kondo Reiichi. Kondo possibly felt a bad premonition. Vertical bar, high vertical bar. He let out a scream while trying to get even a little bit further away from Eri, who was approaching. Naturally, he was perfectly held down. The only thing he could do was scream as his magic was sealed as well. Eri, who came besides Kondo, which caused him to once again tremble with fear and gave him a smile. Kuki and them were raising their voices. Stop! Jay! Stop it!
And stop, agua.
Kondo's muffled screams began to break out. The sword was once again stabbed into Kondo's back, but this time where his heart was. For a little while, though, Kondo struggled and showed tenacity. Because of his strong status, his movements quickly became feeble, and he stopped moving altogether. Eri placed her hands on Kondo and began to mutter a chant. After she completed the chant and muttered the magic name Bind Soul, a semi-transparent Kondo overlapped with his own corpse. Just after that, the knight who was holding down Kondo got up and moved back one step. Koki and them were waiting anxiously. Koki stood up with a soulless expression just like the surrounding soldiers and knights.
Yes, one puppet's been completed / vertical bar.
Harry's bright voice resounded as the other students looked at Kondo with surprise as he stood still silently and expressionlessly. Just now, one person was finally killed. Towards the scene of death, they couldn't even voice out their thoughts.
Eri, why?
Towards Suzu, who voiced out a Gestian with a shocked expression, Eri voiced out the worst possible conclusion.
Ni Suzu? Thank you. Japan and even here, you were very convenient to use to stay nearby Kuki-kun. I give up. The atmosphere between Kuki-kun as he was around Shizuku and Kaori was too much. If you approached carelessly, other women would drill holes into you. Because we had no powers on that side, it was a matter of time before you'd self-destruct for getting close. In that respect, I was thankful for Suzu's existence. You seemed to be bright no matter how foolishly used and exposed you were. Even if I approached Kauki and them, no one would complain about it. That's why the position of Suzu Tanamura's best friend was truly convenient. Thanks to you, I was able to stay close to Koki-kun over on the other side. And even when in a different world we got to be in the same party, Suzu was really convenient. That's why, thank you.
From the shock of Eri's confession, the sounds of something breaking within Suzu ranged out. Suzu learned that her best friend, which she had been together with and believed in all the time, was nothing more than a fantasy. Even the light of the escapism within her eye disappeared.
Eri, you're...
Towards the overboarding words, Shizuku yelled out in anger. Nia, who was turned into a puppet, pulled up Shizuku's head by her hair and pounded it onto the ground. However, as if she was stating, "What about it?" Shizuku's eyes flared up in anger.
You're angry, huh? That expression that you've got is very good. I extremely hated you. Your face fit in so naturally. Besides Koki-kun, and even your eyes carried a sense of condescending attitude. I hated everything about you. That's why, for you in particular, I'll love and be giving you a special role.
A role, you say?
Kufu, ni, what kind of feelings would you have for killing your best friend after finally meeting together after a long time?
From those words, Shizuku's eyes opened widely as she guessed what Eri was planning to do.
It can't be. Kaori.
As if saying, "You did well." Eri began clapping her hands together with a smirk on her lips. While using Shizuku as a puppet, Eri was going to try and murder Kaori.
It was all right to just leave her with Nagumo, but there's a person who said, I would love to have that person as a puppet. I had been helped in various ways, so I decided to give them their reward. PM, someone who goes through with their promises after all. PM, such a good woman, right?
Ooey, joking around. Gafu, Agu,
While enraged, Shizuku, who tried to move, only managed to voluntarily enlarge the wound which was inflicted on her. Nia's blade sunk further in.
Ah, is it painful? Hurts? Pam, kind-hearted so. Right now, it'll relieve you of your pain.
This time it appears to be Shizuku's turn. With a smirking smile, she compromised. Kuki and them desperately tried to resist, as an illusion of Shizuku becoming a puppet like Kondo came into their minds. Kuki's resistance in particular was much more intense. While desperately raising his voice, cracks began to appear on the 5 magic sealing shackles which were on him. Did he use limit breakthrough and supremacy dispersal? Terrifying pressure began to overflow from his body. However, the knights whose brain limiters were removed showed extreme strength incomparable towards their lifetime, and perfectly held down his joints. It wasn't possible to immediately shake them off. Kuki's expression became crossed with despair. Shizuku was desperately focused her conscience, which was fainting, Because of the amount of blood she was losing, she decided that until the final moment, she would continue staring directly into Eri's eyes with fierce anger until she averted her eyes. At that, Eri looked down on her with a smirk on her lips. Did she want to perform the last rites herself? In the end, she received a sword from a nearby knight.
See you later then, Shizuku? Pretending to be your friend seemed to make me want to puke.
Though Shizuku was staring at Eri, inside of her heart she was looking towards her best friend. Although she knows it'll likely not reach her, still, thinking about the tragedy that was to come in the future, she gave her prayers to her best friend who was on a trip somewhere in the world.
The next time we meet, please do not trust me. Stay alive, obtain happiness.
The knight's sword, which was invertedly held in her hand, reflected the moonlight and shined, and, as if driving a wooden stake into a vampire, the sharp tip of the sword was brought down quickly towards Shizuku's heart. While watching the approaching danger, Shizuku prayed, "Please allow my best friend to survive. Please allow her to obtain happiness. Although ill be going on ahead, the dead me would end up hurting you, but because he is near you, I'm sure you'll be all right. Live strongly, gain happiness with your beloved person, please." Fadingly, the world began to pass by slowly within Shizuku's mind within that moment. Ah, this is my life flashing before my eyes. Finally, Shizuku began to think that the sword would now pierce through. Her life, P, was not taken.
Huh?
Eri's voice sounded out along with Shizuku's. The knight's sword which Eri brought down was stopped by a barrier which was the size of a palm. The two who were completely stunned at what had happened heard the voice of someone which should not have been there. Being driven into a corner, the voice was full of impatience. It was the person who Shizuku was wishing happiness for. Her best friend's voice.
Shizuku-chan.
Along with the voice, before she noticed 10 shining barriers were created and protected her. And within those, there were also lights which cut in between Nia and Eri that bursted out. Should it have been called barrier burst or something? It was a technique which makes the magical power contained within the barriers go out of control and bursts out light as well as letting loose the remains of the barrier.
3.
Eri immediately covered her face with both of her arms, but she was blown back after flinching due to the bright light which caused her to lose her balance as the remains of the barrier rammed into her. Nia, who was holding down Shizuku, was also similarly blown back. Although she immediately got back up to try and restrain Shizuku, before that, a rope of light grew out from the ground and bounded her. Shizuku was completely dumbfounded at the current situation and turned towards the voice which called out her name. And from within the gaps of the knights who were surrounding them, she caught the appearance of her best friend, which shouldn't have been here. It was not an illusion. Kaori was definitely looking at Shizuku with a grief expression. Surely with the sight of Shizuku and everyone else's tragic state, being able to just barely make it in time has allowed her eyes to loosen up in relief.
Kaori. Shizuku-chan, wait for a bit. I help you right away.
Kaori's voice sounded out desperately toward Shizuku and them who were surrounded by soldiers as she appeared from the entrance of the plaza. Then, she quickly started chanting full heal recovery magic. It was the first-class recovery magic of the light system, sacred text. From her classmates' current state and the situation, she judged that she should quickly heal all members.
Why are you here? You guys sure are set on getting in my way.
Eri gave out orders to the knights as her face distorted in anger. The knights all attacked Kaori together in order to stop her chant. However, Kaori was not hurt. The swords that the knights were wielding were stopped by a barrier of light.
Everyone, what exactly happened? Return to your senses. Eri, what exactly does this mean?
Having protected Kaori, who was chanting the first-class recovery magic, Ririana soon appeared right behind Kaori. A sphere-like barrier wrapped around Kaori and herself in order to defend themselves. Ririana was extremely confused as the situation was that the knights and soldiers were trying to kill Kuki and them, and they were also following Eri's commands. While placing up the barrier, she called out to Gesti and Eri. However, Eri wasn't listening at all. Ririana's techniques were definitely of the higher class. Being able to cover an entire caravan in a barrier and holding out against the attacks of over 40 bandits. That's why, even if the knights delivered severe attacks with their limiters removed, it was definitely capable of holding out until Kaori's chant was finished. And, because Eri understood that, her expression showed impatience.
Gee, it can't be helped, I guess.
Was it because of impatience? Eri gave up on turning her classmates into puppets and decided to kill them all off before they were healed. Then, at that time, suddenly, before Ririana's eyes, one of the knights who brandished his sword against the barrier was beheaded and collapsed onto the ground. The one who appeared behind the fallen knight was Daisuke Hiyama.
Shirasaki, Princess Rihanna, are you all right?
Hiyama-san? With such an awful wound you...
Ririana's face turned pale as she saw Hayama's state. Although her chant wasn't interrupted, Kaori's eyes also opened up widely. That was to be expected, as Hiyama's chest was drenched in blood. No matter how you looked at it, he had desperately and recklessly tried to escape from his restraints. He shook violently and staggered. Ririana quickly removed part of the barrier and allowed Hiyama, who had his hand placed on the barrier, inside. With a thump, Hiyama fell down. However, in that moment, Shizuku's impatient shout resounded out.
Don't! Get away from him!
She warned them desperately while vomiting out blood. Shizuku had noticed. Why was only Hiyama able to break out of the restraints when even Kuki couldn't? And who was the person that Eri talked about who wanted Kaori? It was clear that Ririana's barrier would stay in place until Kaori's chant was finished. Despite all that, the only person who would pretend to help out...
Hakuyu?
Shizuku's warning was not on time. Ririana's barrier disappeared. What was seen there was the appearance of Ririana, who was embracing Kaori's back, closely had been knocked down onto the ground. An assword ran through Kaori's chest. Shizuku's scream echoed out. With an crazed look in his eyes, Hiyama had embraced Kaori's back closely with his face buried onto her neck. What was in his hands behind Kaori was obviously a sword which pierced through her heart. Hiyama was never injured in the first place. He had been pretending while preparing in the case that Kuki's explosive powers as the hero allows him to break free. And though he was surprised at Kaori's and Ririana's appearance, he judged that at the rate things were going, Kuki and them would get healed and decided to act.
Finally, PV finally obtained it. As expected, PM better than Nagumo? Yeah, that's right. Na Shirasa, no Kaori, na Gihi. Oi, Nakamura, hurry up already. The contract.
Era shrugged her shoulders towards Hiyama's words, and in order to place Binsol onto Kaori, she approached. Right afterwards, a scream resounded out.
Gaga! You guys...
Kuki was, desperately trying to break out of the restraints even as his body creaked, as his anger was at his boiling point. He had thought that Kaori had been killed and seems to have lost himself. The cracks on the 5 magic ceiling shackles began to gradually grow larger. It was extraordinary strength. However, it was still not enough to be released from the knight's restraints. Then, as Hiyama relaxed as he saw that, a low muttered voice could be heard in his ear. If you looked, it was Kaori who was muttering even after receiving a fatal wound. Hiyama became anxious and brought his ear closer to her mouth.
And what he heard.
At the end of the ear, I smile. Sacred text.
Even with a mortal wound, she completed the first-class magic. Kaori's magic was casted through willpower. Hayama's eyes were opened wide in astonishment. Kaori herself should have realized that a fatal wound was inflicted onto her. Despite it all, till the last breath, what she muttered were not cries of lament, nor calling out the name of a precious person. She decided to fight. Kaori had thought about it. He, the person who she fell for, no matter the situation and no matter the opponent, he fought without giving up. If so, then, she who wished to stand next to him could not expose such ungracefulness, and with barely any consciousness left, with just her strong desires to finish chanting the magic, it has definitely been completed in exchange for her life.
Ripples of light began to spread out from Kaori. In the blink of an eye, it ran throughout the plaza and resulted as a powerful heal for those that were injured. The swords were being pushed out by the healing light. For some reason, the puppet's movements also became more dull. Naturally, the light of healing also affected Kaori, though the wound was being healed. The injury that Kaori received was through a vital place, unlike the others. Moreover, as the wound was closing up, Hiyama frantically gouged into her wound, and she wasn't healed at all. With that, Kaori was certain to die.
Oh! Woo!
Kuki's scream gushed out. With his body healed, he could perform at his best. With that, the shackles that were already cracked were all destroyed as if they were fragile things. At the same time, pure white light radiated intensely from his body, expressing his anger. With the intense torrent of light, Kuki had raised his stats by a magnitude of 5. It was the final derivation of limit breakthrough, supremacy dispersal.
Yeah!
Although the knights were trying to restrain Kuki, Kuki easily snatches the sword of the knight which stabbed him and easily cut the puppet into two, then held out his hand to retrieve his sacred sword which was taken from him. The sacred sword rotated throughout the air and flew into Kuki's hand. Eri was expressionless. Puppet soldiers were rushing at him, but Kauki easily cut them into two. He shouldn't be able to overcome the feelings of murder. However, right now, with the intense fury of losing a comrade, he recognized that his opponents were already dead, so there was no hesitation in his sword. On the other hand, the Front Lines group gathered around the other classmates and the fights to protect the Stay Behind group began. No matter how many they took down, they were still surrounded once again by puppet soldiers. There was also no time to remove the magic sealing shackles, so their fight was based purely on physical strength. Ryotaro and Nagayama literally became a meat wall. They desperately tried to protect the Stay Behind group, which were trembling. Shizuku desperately attempted to get to Kaori's place with a tearful expression. However, just like Ryotaro and them, she was still in shackles. Waves of puppet soldiers attacked and she wasn't able to easily advance ahead. At that time, Kuki had finally beaten the puppet soldiers which surrounded him. With an angered look, Kuki glared angrily at Yama and Eri and quickly advanced. But there, Eri's trump card which took advantage of Kuki's weak point appeared. As a result, just as Eri predicted, Kuki's sword stopped. Kuki called out towards that trump card in a shaking voice.
It can't be even, Malda-san.
Right. The reason why Kuki's sword stopped in its place was because it was Meld Roginsu, leader of the Knights.
Kuki, why are you pointing your sword at me? I didn't teach you such things.
Nah, Mel-san, I vertical bar.
Kuki, don't listen. Meld-san is already...
Shizuku's voice scolded at Kuki, who was shaken. When he regained his senses, Meld's sword was already approaching. Immediately, he used his sacred sword to receive the blow. Along with the terrific shockwave, Kuki's legs shook. It appears that the kingdom's strongest knight has had his limiter removed.
Mel-san, I'm sorry.
Although Kuki's expression twisted in sorrow, he swung his sacred sword in intense waves towards Meld. Even while dead, Meld's swordsmanship was still great. He barely managed to get by Kuki's attacks while he used supremacy dispersal. Because of Meld's appearance, Kuki's boiling head had cooled down a little. His sword attacks, which ignored feelings of murder, began to dull. However, even still, Meld shouldn't be able to beat the current Kuki. Finally, Meld's sword was flung away. Kuki instantly closed in and side-swept at Meld's neck with his sacred sword. But before the sacred sword dug into Meld's neck...
Help me, Kuki.
Kuki's sword stopped unintentionally after hearing Meld's words. Even though it might be impossible, maybe, Meld might not have actually been killed and is only being manipulated. Isn't it still possible to help him? He was unable to throw away such thoughts. This was Kuki's weak point. In short, it was half-heartedness. If you're going to help, then help. If you're going to kill, then kill. You can choose either one, but resolution and determination are needed. Kuki had none of that. Based on the information presented to him, a convenient interpretation of the situation occurred.
That's why, though he usually doesn't doubt his righteousness, he loses himself at the most crucial times. Meld used his foot to bounce up the knight's sword which was on the ground. In an instant, with the hand which gripped the sword, he once again crossed swords with Kuki. However, Kuki didn't have the overwhelming drive from a while ago. Rather, Meld was the one who was pushing. After somehow managing through Meld's attacks, Kuki's body lost its strength and his knees gave out. It was not due to the time limit of supremacy dispersal. That much time hasn't passed by yet. The incident didn't stop with just that. Finally, he even began to vomit out loads of blood. The blood soaked into the ground and Kuki's confusion increased greatly.
Phew, it's finally kicking in. It was quite the strong poison, as expected of Koki-san. If I didn't prepare Melde-san, I would have lost.
Towards Eri's relaxed voice, Koki desperately tried to support up his body with a questionable expression.
Kufufu with the cause of the prince kissing the princess. If the princess kisses the prince, he'll fall into a slumber, killed, and become hers. There's that kind of development as well, right? Even I have some preparations in case of emergencies.
With those words, Kuki had realized the kiss that Eri gave him in the beginning. In that moment, she likely made both of them take in poison. Eri herself may have taken the antidote earlier. He never would have thought that he'd be fed poison through mouth to mouth, let alone being able to imagine what someone in love would do. Kuki once again was reminded of the fact that the Eri that everyone had known was nowhere to be seen. With the poison's effects, Kuki was completely unable to move. Are laughed out satisfyingly, and then turned around to walk towards Kaori once again. Because soon the time limit for Bind Soul will be over. Hiyama demanded Eri with an ogre-like form. Kaori was dead and about to be defiled. With that, Kuki and Shizuku were both furious with anger, and with a regretting expression, Shizuku was about to charge straight in. However, Eri had already placed her hand over Kaori. Eri began chanting the spell. After several tens of seconds, the Kaori puppet which will obey all of Hiyama's words will be completed. Shizuku and their expressions flared up in anger. Hiyama was laughing loudly, and Eri was smiling with a smirk. Then, a voice which betrayed the battlefield that was filled with despair and betrayal sounded out. What the heck is going on? It was the boy with white hair and an eye patch, Hajime Nagumo's voice. Towards Hajime's appearance, as if time stopped, everyone's movement ceased. This was because Hajime's ferocious pressure was being emitted. Normally, the puppet soldiers which had no emotions shouldn't have stopped due to Hajime's pressure being released, but Eri, who was their spiritualist, was overwhelmed by the natural feeling of the weak instinctively concealing themselves as the strong came around, which in turn caused the puppet soldiers to also do the same. Hajime was completely unfazed at the hundreds of eyes gazing at him, and he began to check out the surrounding circumstances. A large amount of soldiers and knights were attacking his classmates. His classmates were grouped up and formed a circle. Meld was in front of Koki, who was on the ground and vomiting out blood. Pounding her knee with a black katana in one hand was Shizuku, Eri and Hiyama, who became stiff, and Hiyama, while embracing onto Kaori, was holding onto the sword which secured that Kaori's life had ceased. Space. The moment he saw her appearance, an out-of-this-world terrifying presence instantly appeared at the plaza. As if insects were crawling throughout their entire body, inside it felt like their hearts were being clenched directly and left them uncomfortable. They trembled frighteningly against the presence of overwhelming death. It was exactly like their blood had frozen. For an instant their bodies lost its temperature, and the heavy murderous intent made them envision their deaths. In an instant, Hajime's appearance disappeared. And Hajime, who was moving at a pace which no one could comprehend, had appeared besides Kaori with a roaring sound. The roaring sound was caused by Hiyama being flung back and ramming straight into the back wall of the plaza and destroying it. In an instant, Hajime had kicked Hiyama in the chest and sent him flying without influencing Kaori at all. Normally, one blow would be enough to cause Hiyama's entire body to burst apart. However, because he held back a bit, it only caused numerous bones to break and damage to the internal organs. By now, he should have fainted in the wall. Once he wakes up again from the pain, the hell would likely once again begin. Hajime held up Kaori with one arm and cleared her face of her hair. Then, with a loud voice, he called out to his comrade, "Teo, I'm counting on you."
Leave it to me.
Shirasaki-san.
In response towards Hajime's request, Teo quickly rushed over towards them. Aiko's complexion changes as she also came towards Kaori's side. Once Teo was handed Kaori by Hajime, she quickly began chanting.
It's useless. She's already dead. I would have never expected that you guys would be coming here. No, the moment Kaori appeared, I should have noticed. It seems like it's already over for Hiyama. I'll give it to you. As long as you're not hostile against me, I'll bring Kaori back to life with magic for you. It wouldn't be genuine, but she'll stay pretty like now. It's better than rotting, right? Nee?
Radiantly, Eri proposed her suggestion while sweating from her forehead, disregarding Aiko, whose eyes were opened up widely in astonishment by his side. Hajime abruptly got up. Eri, who knew of Hajime's strength, held out her hands as she clicked her tongue secretly, while emphasizing that Kaori would just be rotting if left alone. But Hajime's overflowing murderous intent wasn't shaken one bit. Expressionlessly, like wearing a no mask, he slowly walked towards Eri.
Wait a bit, Nagumo. Come on. Look at the surrounding people. There's not much difference between them and the living. Although it can't be helped that she's dead, at the very least I could make her like them. Furthermore, I can create a Kaori that you like. For that, you'll absolutely need me.
Eri was rapidly speaking as she backed away. Then, at that time, a shadow was running up behind Hajime. A blow from a sharp spear which was incomparable to the other puppet soldiers shot at him. The shadow's identity was Kondo Reiichi. It was the spear user that was pitifully killed by Eri earlier and turned into a puppet. To begin with, although I say puppet, it still exhibited the strength of a cheat which came from a different world. The powerful thrust incorporated with Kondo's class Spearmaster was spiraling with wind straight towards Hajime's heart.
Carelessness is our greatest enemy, as well as Reijo.
Eri's expression of impatience was quickly changed into one of a smirk, but as if Hajime didn't feel a thing, he continued walking, which caused her expression to cramp up. Hajime had probably already knew what was coming up from behind. A mass of red magical power was compressed to the size of a 10-yen coin and completely held off the spear which was thrusted out. It was the derivation of Vajra, intensive strengthening. Hajime silently turned his left elbow towards his back, and without any hesitation he shot with his shotgun. A roaring sound resounded, and at the same time Kondo, who received the attack of great power from super point-blank range in the face, had his head turned into small chunks and blown away. The sound of blood splattering and splashing around was heard clearly.
Kill him.
With a steep expression, Eri ordered the next puppet soldiers and Meld. Although not as much as Kuki, Hajime had held some intimacy with Meld. At the vertical bar, Orcus Great Labyrinth vertical bar, it was to the point of using a potion to heal him who was near death. Therefore, she intended to use the chance which exposes itself through hesitation, just like it did with Kuki. The puppet soldiers were waiting eagerly for that opening to be exposed. However, that kind of common-sense judgment won't work on Hajime. While disregarding Meld, who was coming at him, Hajime took out Metsurai from his treasure warehouse. All of the sudden, from out of nowhere, the form of brutal weapons appeared and caused everyone present to hold their breaths.
Everyone, lie down.
Ryutaro and Nagayama, while crouched down, dragged down students that were still standing onto the ground. Immediately after that, with the unique rotation sound and shooting sound resounding out, the incarnation of destruction roared out. It was once used to completely crush all golems that the Liberator manipulated, turned huge crowds of demons into a sea of blood, the fangs of the monster which offsetted even the silver feathers of death which God's apostles shot out. That kind of thing was released. There was no way the puppet soldiers would be able to withstand it. The electrically charged bullets weren't lukewarm enough to just be said to have shot just one person. It went and broke through all obstacles, while blowing away the plaza wall as if it were just paper trash. With Hajime as the center, everything was being cut down. The puppet soldiers' bodies were crushed, reduced into lumps of flesh which scattered around and could not be distinguished at all. Before long, Metsurai's roaring stopped, and once again footsteps echoed in the silent plaza. Everyone who was laying down on the ground were motionless. Naturally, the one who was walking after the attack, which mowed down everything in its path, was Hajime. Everyone else was similarly desperately lowering their heads until the storm passed by. The tip of shoes appeared in front of Eri's eyes. Eri slowly raised her face. She glanced up at the owner of the shoes. What she saw there was a pair of eyes which looked at her as if she was just a pebble on the roadside without value. Hajime no longer carried Metsurai in his hands. He was simply standing above Eri and looking down on her. Eri couldn't say anything and only returned the gaze with an aghast expression. Then Hajime slowly began to open his mouth. And? Hajime had no further information on what Eri had done. He just simply understood that she was an enemy. If it was simply an enemy, then all he had to do was mercilessly murder it and everything would end. However, Eri had touched something which she should have never touched. It was already at the point where just killing her wasn't enough anymore. Before she died, she needs to feel despair. That's why Hajime asked her a question. What else can you do? You can't do anything, huh? Eri accurately understood what he meant and began to tightly grit her teeth. The edge of her lip had a cut and blood was dripping down. Up until now, she was the owner of this place. She should have been in the position with an overwhelming advantage. However, in an instant, Hajime had unreasonably overturned that which caused her to hold hatred and awe. The moment that Eri was about to unintentionally curse out passionately at him, the muzzle of a gun was suddenly pushed against her forehead. Eri swallowed up her curses, as the quick draw was so quick she wasn't even able to comprehend when it was pulled out. Whatever your motive was, I have no intentions of hearing any of those worthless things. If you've got nothing left to show, then die. Hajime's finger began to pull on the trigger. The Hajime in Eri's eyes right now was someone who would murder his own classmates himself, and realized that even if she had turned Kaori into a puppet, he wouldn't have even hesitated. I'm dead.
Eri's head was completely filled up with those words. However, Eri's devilish luck seems to have not run out yet.
The moment when Eri's head was about to splatter, a flame bullet came flying towards Hajime. Its flames had a considerable amount of power in them, however, it obviously didn't work against Hajime. He turned Donner's muzzle towards the flame bullet, and with pinpoint accuracy, he shot through its core, and it easily dispersed.
Nagumu!
From the interior of the dispersing flame bullet was Hiyama, who was covered in wounds, and it was doubtful if he was capable of human speech anymore, as he was calling out Hajime's name in an odd tone. With a sword in his hand, a large amount of blood being vomited out of his mouth, and his right shoulder broken and badly damaged, which hung down as he aimlessly flung himself at Hajime. He no longer looked like an impudent ogre, now he only looked like some kind of ugly variant of a creature. Hajime braced himself like it was a hassle, as Hiyama ran up and performed a worthless kick. Dogon! An explosion sounding like a sonic boom resounded, and Hayama's body was floating in the air. He wasn't blown away because the shockwave wasn't allowed to leave his body. Then as Hiyama was just floating in the air, Hajime lifted his leg up towards the sky and swung it down with intense force. It was exactly like his heel drop was an axe swung down to chop firewood. It mercilessly struck Hiyama's head and threw him onto the ground. The ground cracked because of the impact, and Hiyama's fresh blood from his head was splattering into those cracks. Hiyama, who bounced up like a brick, was already wide-eyed and lost his consciousness. Anyone who saw him could see that he was already barely alive. However, Hajime had a quality which wouldn't let up. His bouncing head was once again kicked upwards to float in the air. Was something secretly carried out? With that impact, Hiyama regained his consciousness. Hajime gripped Hiyama's neck and raised him up into the air. Hiyama, who was hanging in mid-air, was violently thrashing around without any power. Hajime, who had inhumane strength, was unfazed.
Yo-you! Is not fo yo-you! Gaori wood! Be mine!
He was overflowing with grudge and murderous intent. It was shivering to think that a human could fall this low with ugliness. Would an ordinary man divert his eyes away? They would likely be overcome by feelings of sickness and run away. However, Hajime didn't show that kind of reaction towards Hiyama's. Rather, on the contrary, Hajime's eyes held pity. No matter if I existed or not, the results would have been the same. At the very least, with your nature, nothing would have happened, even if the world was overturned.
Is your fault.
Don't place the blames on others. The reason you fell so low was your own fault. Even in Japan and over here, you were always the loser. Not someone else. It was yourself. All you did was criticize everyone else in dissatisfaction, while not shouldering anything for yourself. You're a genuine underdog.
Ear killed you. Destinately just you.
Hiyama became further enraged and insane from Hajime's words. After Hajime looked at the underdog who continued to lose himself, he noticed something in the distance and looked towards it. What was over in that direction was the vanguard of demons who invaded the kingdom. Hajime returned his cold gaze onto Hiyama, then, once again, threw him up into the air, and with a blow from his artificial arm, he hit where Hiyama was falling down according to gravity.
So, I fear I may one have been following at somewhere else they are on your back.
Rotational force was applied in with the impact, and Hiyama began rotating like a top. Let's test if you can survive or not. Ma-e, it's probably impossible for you. Hajime also hammered him with a spinning kick which caused the air to be blown away. Hajime let out an unpleasant sound and was blown outside of the plaza by the shock wave. Rather than quickly shooting Hayama to death, Hajime was unconsciously avoiding his vitals and pummeled him. It wasn't revenge for dropping him into the abyss. It was revenge for injuring Kaori. Although he doesn't know the amount of awareness the actual person in question has, Hajime began to think that just killing him off comfortably wasn't enough. That was how he thought of the idea of kicking Hiyama into the crowd of demons after just barely keeping him alive. However, due to dealing with Hiyama, the time he had to kill Eri was shortened. Although Eri didn't run away, an Aurora was shot at Hajime. Hajime jumped back while clicking his tongue and used Donner to shoot where the Aurora had come from. 3 explosions roared out simultaneously, like a dragon climbing up the waterfall of Aurora. 3 flashes tore through the sky. Immediately afterwards, the Aurora's trajectory bent. It nearly baked Kuki, but thanks to Eri, they managed to evade somehow. Even for Eri, it would be a bad joke that she didn't want any part in if Koki was completely wiped out due to friendly fire. Soon, the Aurora calmed down and Freed descended down on his white dragon.
Aye? That's enough, boy with white hair. If you don't want to lose any more of your precious compatriots and kingdom citizens, then settle down.
It appears that Freed was under the misconception that Hajime was fighting for Kuki and them and the kingdom. If you looked around the surrounding area, you'd notice that demons had already surrounded Ryutaro and them, Shizuku, and aiming at Teo and Aiko. If Hajime and them seriously fought back, there would be a great deal of collateral damage, so they decided to take on hostages instead. Although Hajime doesn't know that Freed was already severely injured by Yue, Freed realized that and used this as a last resort. It should be noted that the wounds caused by Yue, although far from being completely healed, was healed by the White Crow's inherent magic. Then, at that time, as if something happened to Kaori, Teo called out loudly to Hajime.
Master, I've somehow fixed it for now. However, any more than this will take time. If possible, I'd like to have Yue's cooperation as well. We can't leave it as a temporary fix forever.
Hajime nodded powerfully as he looked behind his shoulder at Teo. The classmates who didn't understand the circumstances had dubious expressions. However, Freed, who also had Age of Gods magic, had somehow managed to guess. He looked at Teo's magic with wide eyes.
Ho! New Age of God's magic. By chance is it vertical bar, Kamiyama's vertical bar? Then it would do you well to tell me of its location. If you defy me, then ye...
The moment that Freed tried to threaten Hajime and them for the location of Vertical Bar, Kamiyama Vertical Bar Great Labyrinth, flames erupted from Donner. Immediately, the turtle-type demon set up a barrier and somehow managed to endure it from being fully destroyed. Freed narrowed his eyes, and the surrounding demons closed in more.
What's the meaning of this? Are your compatriots' lives not important? The more you guys resist, the more the kingdom citizens will suffer as well. Or are you such a fool that you can't comprehend that? There are 100,000 monsters at the outer wall, and on the other side of the gate is 1,000,000 demons. No matter how strong you guys are, continuing to fight while protecting everything is...
Hajime, who received those words, turned his cold eyes away from Freed and towards the outside of the kingdom. An army of 100,000 was trying to invade into the kingdom. Then he silently took out an induction stone which was the size of a fist out of his treasure warehouse. He activated the induction stone while disregarding Freed's dubious look and emitted a light which was uncomparable to the ring which manipulated the crossbits. Freed, who started feeling an intense bad premonition, immediately shot an aurora at Hajime. However, Hajime's Donner kept them in check. As a result, he was able to activate the device. Dash, light of condemnation poured down from the sky. The pillar of light was the representative which connected the sky and the ground. Whatever it touched, no matter the race, sex, nor social class, everything was mercilessly destroyed and erased, burning up the atmosphere and tearing through the darkness as if it was the daylight. The sun's rays, the targets were mowed down. The pillar of light, as if investigating, let out a roar as it struck down onto the earth. The diameter was around 50 meters. Demons, Majinzokus, and living organisms alike were all evaporated under the light. Without exception, the shockwave and heat waves were intensely scattering destruction on its surroundings. When Hajime poured magical power into the induction stone in his hand, the pillar of light moved through and mowed down all the demons and Majinzoku that were fleeing away on foot. Defending was useless. Evading was useless. That is, unless you could travel through space like Freed, it would be impossible for organisms which ran on foot to get away. The demons and Majinzoku who were trying to invade at the outer wall saw the pillar of light approaching, and they all began to panic. They desperately tried to advance onwards into the kingdom madly. The pillar of light zigzagged along and trampled the huge army. Everything up until the outer walls were eradicated and disappeared into the void. All that was left was the smoke which rose from where the earth was scorched and an enormous crater, as well as deep scars which were carved into the earth. The Majinzoku who managed to just barely make it on time into the kingdom weren't relieved, just sitting down with their comrades and surprised that their army had completely vanished in an instant. With that, Freed and Eri, who were in front of him, Shizuku and everyone else as well, their thinking stopped and were just spacing out in utter amazement. The foolish one is you big fool. When exactly did I say that I was allied with the kingdom and these guys here? Don't just selfishly categorize me with them. If you want a war, then go right ahead. However, if you get in my way just like now, I'll erase everything. I'm not free enough to waste my time on million opponents, though. This time around, I'll let you off, so hurry up with the remaining people and get lost.
You're the commander of the army, right?
It was hard to object after his comrades were obliterated in an instant. Freed's eyes were dyed in rage and hatred. However, even if he created a gate and allowed his huge army to come through, he had no information on the pillar of light which Hajime shot. It would only cause to making the same mistakes once again. That alone must be avoided at all costs. Although it was vexing for Hajime as well to let them get away, right now it was necessary to treat Kaori as soon as possible. If time goes on, they'll lose the upper hand. Much like doing something for the first time, he was completely winging it. Furthermore, the blow from the previous light was actually a weapon in its prototype stage. After that one shot, it had already broken. Without the annihilation weapon, he'd have no time to deal with 1,000,000 demons. It would be a bad idea to kill Freed, who was the commander of the army. Freed, who doesn't know of that, bit down onto his lips and clenched his fists so hard with rage that it started bleeding. He was thinking that he could no longer continue sacrificing his people, and while opening up a gate, he replied back full of grudge.
I'll definitely repay this debt. Only you, in my God's name, I will definitely destroy you.
As Freed was turning back, he glanced at Eri to urge her to get onto the white dragon. Eri looked at Kuki, who was surviving due to his strong status, and smiled at him with a smile filled with obsessiveness and insanity. Even without words, you'd know it was the look that was filled with will of obtaining Kuki no matter what. At the same time that Freed and Eri, who were on the white dragon, passed through the gate, 3 bursts of magic bullets lit up and roared through the sky. It was probably a retreat signal. At the same time, Yue and Shaya came down from the sky with great force.
Hajime, where's that ugly man?
Hajime-san, where's that scoundrel?
It appears that both of them came chasing after Freed to beat him.
They probably already knew that the Pillar of Light was due to Hajime, so they didn't ask. However, right now they don't have the time to deal with those simple matters. Hajime told Yue and Shia about Kaori's death. Both of them opened their eyes up in surprise. However, after looking at Hajime's eyes, which contained spirit, they immediately recovered.
And then Hajime asked for Yue's help with his eyes. Yue accurately understood what she needed to do, and with few powerful words,
N, leave it to me.
She nodded. They turned around and rushed towards Teo. Then Hajime held on to Kaori in a princess carry position and intended to leave the plaza straight away. However, just then, Shizuku called out to Hajime while staggering with a desperate expression.
Nagumo-kun! Kaori is! About Kaori, what should I... Oh...
Shizuku seemed to have been exhausted to a state which was never seen before, with such a grievous expression. If left alone, she may suffer from mental illnesses. During battle, her tensed heart was able to support her. However, now that that's gone, she's probably being tormented by the pain of her best friend's death. Hajime entrusted Kaori to Shia and told her to go ahead with Teo. Yue and them who sympathized with Shizuku's expression left the plaza while being guided by Teo. His classmates were still in a state of being unable to move. Hajime went and dropped to a knee before Shizuku, who was sitting like a girl with her head dropped. And with both hands sandwiching Shizuku's cheeks, he forced her to look up until their sights aligned. Yaegashi, don't break. Believe in us and wait. I'll let you two meet again without fail.
Nagumo-kun!
Shizuku's eyes, which had lost its light, only a bit but power had returned. Then and there, Hajime laughed while saying things which sounded like a joke. If Yaegashi becomes like this, who'll take care of all the troublesome things in the future? What'll happen if Kaori saw a broken Yaegashi? Please give me a break. I'm not a problem-loving human like...
Who's the problem-loving human, Baka? Believing that is fine, right?
Hajime smiled with an earnest expression and nodded firmly. Up close, Shizuku was staring into Hajime's shining eyes, and she understood that he was serious. He was seriously trying to do something about Kaori, who should already be dead. Within those strong-willed eyes, Shizuku felt that her frozen heart melted a bit. The light within Shizuku's eyes further increased, and just like Hajime did, she nodded powerfully. Then the will to believe in Hajime and them appeared from within. After confirming that Shizuku's risk of breaking down mentally has lowered drastically, Hajime removed a test tube container out of the treasure warehouse and placed it in Shizuku's hands.
This is...
Let the other childhood friend drink it. He's in quite the bad shape. After Hajime's words, Shizuku glanced towards Koki, who was laying on the ground. Koki had already lost consciousness. He was visibly weakened. She recalled that the holy water which Hajime handed her was once used to immediately heal Meld, who was about to die, and presumed that it was the most effective medicine out of all other medicine. As for Hajime, he'd be troubled if Shizuku broke down if Koki dies even after he said all that he did to her. After looking at Shizuku's expression, it appears that she was more thankful than expected. When Shizuku tightly grasped the container of holy water, she looked at Hajime with moistened eyes and said words of thanks.
Thank you, Nagumo-kun.
As soon as Hajime received those words of thanks, he immediately turned around. Then he started chasing after Yue and them like the wind. After Hajime left the plaza, Shizuku made Kuki drink the holy water and he recovered in no time. The puppet soldiers that Eri had numbered up to 500 people, and out of that it seems that 300 were turned into minced meat at the plaza by Hajime. Most likely the missing soldiers went with Freed through the gate into Majinzoku territory, although it was later found out in investigations that magic formations were created from huge magic stones which were buried in the earth on the outskirts of the kingdom. That appears to have been the secret to Freed being able to transfer his military. Also, it appears that the king and other influential leaders were all killed by Eri's puppet soldiers. Currently, the seat of king within the Herihi kingdom was open. Until the confusion subsides, Ririana and the safe queen, Rururia, will be taking the lead in the kingdom's reconstruction. Most likely, once they've settled down, Prince Randell, who was also safe, will be ascending to the throne. The number one cause of confusion was that there was no communication with the church. Even though the kingdom has turned into such an amazing state, widespread uneasiness and distrust was spreading throughout the followers as the church didn't appear during or after the war at all. The truth was, everyone related to the church were already blown to smithereens by the explosion at the head temple. If the citizens heard about that, what would they think? A boy with white hair somewhere held slight interest in that question. Also, the pillar of light which annihilated the Majinzoku's large army was Ehito-sama's light of condemnation, which was released in order to save the kingdom, is what the rumors that have been circulating says. It was an incredibly painful story that their faith was further strengthened. Hajime was wondering if he should spread rumors that it was due to the goddess of fertility once again. However, if Aiko heard of that, she'd likely suffer to no end in her mind. People began to wonder of the reason why the church wasn't coming down from Vertical Bar, Kamiyama Vertical Bar, and naturally, they wanted to climb up to find out. However, there was far too much to be done for the reconstruction of the kingdom, so there wasn't anyone to go up 8,000 meters above ground. By the way, because Hajime and them stopped the lift, the only way to reach the head temple was by scaling up the mountain. Also, Hiyama's remains were found a little distance away from the plaza. His body was consumed and messed up here and there, after being completely beaten up by Hajime and blown out of the plaza. Sure enough, he was attacked by demons. It was thought that he was still alive when he got consumed because it appears that there were traces of intense resistance. In particular, his left arm was completely missing, judging from the traces of blood. With his left arm consumed first, he ran desperately for his life, and then the side of his body was then eaten, which caused him to die. If you tried to imagine it, it was likely one of the worst ways to die. With that, a variety of things turned up, and 5 days have passed since the betrayal and death of their friends from the Majinzoku's invasion. It's needless to say anything about Suzu, who was on good terms with Eri. But the classmates who were caught up in her obsession and insanity suffered deep mental wounds. After Hayama and Kondo's deaths, Nakano and Saito, who was always together with them, became hikikomoris. Along with those who sustained deep mental wounds, Koki and them were asked by Ririana and them to lend their powers in reconstructing the kingdom in order to recuperate and recover. Since that day, Hajime and them had not shown up, so they were frequently looking back at that. All members of the front lines and Ai-chan bodyguards should have known of Hajime's powers, but they still didn't know of the overwhelming power of the Pillar of Light which annihilated the large army. Once again, they were forced to feel their difference in power. Because Kuki and them knew of that, they took on less shock than the stay-behind group. Although they heard of Hajime's power from the returning members, they now knew that they had only understood 1/10,000th of Hajime's true terrifyingness. Anyone and everyone could do nothing but be concerned about Hajime, his comrades, and Kaori, who he took with him. And the remarkable one was Shizuku. Although she's doing exactly what needs to be done, once in a while she'll stare off into the distance with eyes that seem to be looking for something in her heart. It was clear to everyone that she was thinking of Kaori. The classmates who witnessed Kaori's death were unsure of what to say about it. From the talk that Hajime had with Shizuku, it seemed to have been something about Kaori coming back, but they were skeptical as the task of reviving a dead person was likely impossible, and because of that they weren't able to comfort themselves. They suspected that it was probably something just like how Eri did. She'll be brought back as a doll. In that case, it was easy to imagine that Shizuku would become further damaged because of that, especially Kuki, who had always cautioned himself as he watched Hajime and them. Kuki himself was extremely down that he was unable to do anything once again and saved twice by Hajime. The fact that Kaori left him for Hajime, Kuki recognized it within himself, was also added in. He wasn't able to hold any good feelings for Hajime. It was the so-called jealousy. However, Kuki himself was not aware of it. It wouldn't be easy for him to admit it, even if he had noticed it. If he recognized it, whether he moves forwards or looks away out of convenience depends all on himself. Both Kuki and Shizuku couldn't be said to have been in bright states. Because Ryutaro is a muscle for brains, he's not reliable, and all classmates were depressed in general. At times like these, it would usually be Suzu's time to show her abilities as a mood maker and brighten things up, but without a question, the actual person is in low tensions. The smiles that she's shown occasionally were painful. It seems to be majorly due to what Eri had said to her. It's understandable. Throughout many years, the person who was thought to have been her best friend had only thought of her on the level of being a convenient tool. Even still, the entire class hasn't completely fallen. The only person moving in order to reconstruct the kingdom single-mindedly was probably only Aiko. Aiko was also worried about Kaori. If she could, she'd do anything but, when weighed against what Hajime and them were trying to do, with Yue and Teo, there she understood that she had no turn. That's why she couldn't neglect the students who remained damaged on the ground and decided to stay. Because Aiko firmly had one-on-one communications with her students and encouraged all of her students to work to their potentials, they were able to move on now. By the way, Aiko had obviously known what had happened to the church, although she knows more about it than anyone else. She stubbornly sealed her lips. That was in order to not obstruct Hajime and them, and at the same time, every time she remembers what she had done, her mouth becomes heavier. Even if it was an unexpected result, her resolution to go through with it was true. That's why when Hajime and them came back, she planned on telling Ririana and them the truth. Police officer, it's me. Although Aiko seemed to be behaving brightly, on the inside, she was trembling in fear. She herself aided Teo in the obliteration of the church. If the students had known that she was involved in the blast which killed Ishtar and them and the knights then, what exactly would they think of her? She fought because she was resolute to not allow her students to become toys of war any longer, although she doesn't regret about that matter. A murderer is a murderer. She was surely already prepared that her students would no longer call her sensei. It should be noted that David and them, the Aiko bodyguard temple knights, were still alive and well. That was because after Aiko had disappeared, they protested to the upper brass, "Let us meet her," many times. And after that was confirmed to never be fulfilled, they decided to search for themselves. The upper brass, who were fed up, decided to lower them onto ground level and restricted them from going into the head temple. And that's how they managed to barely escape from death at the head temple at the time. Currently, they're listening to Aiko's words and working hard to help out with this and that for the reconstruction. With those kinds of feelings, Aiko and the students are respectively holding their own weight in their minds and helping out with Ririana today to reconstruct the kingdom. Today's agenda was to reform the kingdom's knights and employ commanders to each squad at the drilling ground. By the way, the new knight leader's name was Kuzeri Rail. It was a female knight and formerly Ririana's imperial guardsman. The vice commander's name was Neat Komorido. He was the previous commander of the 3rd Night Unit.
Thanks for the hard work, Kauki-san.
During the mock battle screening test, Kuki had been working as a partner for the knights, so he was wiping his sweat at the edge of the drilling grounds, and those words of appreciation ranged out. When Kuki turned his line of sight towards it, Ririana was coming over with a smile.
No, this isn't much of a big deal. As for yourself, Riri, you've barely gotten any sleep recently, huh? Really, thanks for the hard work.
When Kauki showed a wry smile in return, Ririana also showed a wry smile. Both of them hardly had any time to sleep over the past few days. To begin with, the reason why their sleeping time was cut down was due to completely different reasons.
That's because right now is not the time to be sleeping. Casualties, dealing with the loss of beloved people, disposing buildings which collapsed, confirming missing people, repairing the Great Barrier and the Outer Wall, reports and communication with each district, deploying soldiers to investigate the surroundings, reorganizing. This is serious. They're all things that need to be done. Even if I whine about it, there's no other way. Mother has also shared the burden, so I can still go on. The people who are truly suffering are those who lost important people and their property and power.
If you're saying that, then even you.
From what Ririana had said, Kuki tried to point out that even she's lost the king, which was her father, but even if he said it, nothing would change, so he shut his mouth. Riri sympathized with Kuki's feelings and said, "I'm fine," with a smile once again, then changed the topic.
How's Shizuku holding out?
She hasn't changed. Usually it's the same usual Shizuku, but without noticing it, she looks up above for a long time.
As Kuki was saying so, he glanced toward Shizuku, who was talking with Kuzuri at the center of the drilling grounds. The two were probably friends through Ririana. They seemed to be discussing something rather intimately. However, the conversation was suddenly interrupted, and naturally her eyes glanced upwards. In other words, you could tell she was looking towards the top vicinity of vertical bar Kamiyama vertical bar.
She's waiting for them, huh?
That's right. Being honest, the thing that Nagumo said is too untrustworthy, although I'd like for Shizuku and them to meet.
Ririana had a slightly surprised expression as she turned her glance from Shizuku to Koki. Koki's expression had a complicated color. It was clear that what he said was not according to what he thought. Jealousy, suspicion, fear, pride, gratitude, antipathy, various feelings were mixed in impatiently. His expression was difficult to express. Ririana couldn't find the right words to say to Koki. She looked up towards the top of vertical bar Kamiyama vertical bar, where Hajime and them should be. The sky was clear. It's as if the crisis of extinction from a few days ago never happened. That sky looked as if it was in a happy-go-lucky mood. Ririana held slightly bitter feelings towards it and continued looking up at the sky. Then at that time, she began to see a few black dots in the sky. With a doubtful look, Ririana narrowed her eyes, and she noticed that those black dots were gradually growing bigger. She noticed that something was falling down, and panickingly she called out to Kuki by her side.
Solve. Kuki-san, there! Isn't something falling down?
Eh? What are you suddenly, everyone? Watch out! Something's coming from above!
Ririana's attitude surprised Kuki, but, as he looked up in the sky, he confirmed that something was definitely falling down. "Get down, it's an enemy attack," he warned out loudly with an impatient expression. Shizuku and them were panicking, and quickly evacuated the drilling grounds and went beside Kuki and them. Simultaneously, something landed onto the drilling grounds. The earth trembled when whatever was falling crashed as the dust clouds danced about. What appeared from it was Hajime, Yue, Shaya, and with Teo it was 4 people.
Nagumo-kun!
The first one to take off was Shizuku. Exactly like Hajime said, she believed in them and waited. Having excess momentum was unavoidable. However, within Hajime and them, Kaori's appearance was nowhere to be seen. Her expression gradually became uneasy and darkened. "Yo, Yegashi, are you living properly?"
Nagumo-kun, where's Kaori? Why is Kaori not here?
Shizuku relaxed somewhat after Hajime's joke. However, it was the truth that Kaori was not in front of her. As expected, it must have been too hard to overturn Kaori's death. She was already unable to hide her uneasiness, and asked in a trembling voice. On the other hand, Hajime had an indescribably vague expression. "Ah, she'll be here soon? It's just that her appearance may have changed a tiny bit because of that sea. It'll be troubling if you place the blame on me. It's not my fault, so don't get mad."
Eh? Wait a bit. What? It makes me extremely uneasy, though? What do you mean? What did you do to Kaori? Depending on the circumstance with the black katana that you gave me...
Towards Hajime's words, which only further fanned the flames of uneasiness, Shizuku's highlight in her eyes disappeared, and she slowly began to extend her black katana on her waist. Vertical bar, due to vertical bar, Hajime was suppressing Shizuku. Suddenly, they began to hear a scream from the sky.
Hajime-kun, catch me!
When Shizuku and them were wondering what it was and looked up, they saw something with a silver shadow falling down at blistering speeds. With Shizuku's excellent kinetic vision, she saw a woman with silver hair and blue eyes who had the beauty that could compete with a beautiful work of art that a historically named artist produced, and against her cool appearance she was falling down while awkwardly flinging her arms and legs with tears in her eyes and a miserable expression. The silver-haired, blue-eyed woman came straight down, plunging towards Hajime. From her eyes you could see that she trusted that she would be caught. But betraying such things were Hajime's quality. In the place where he was supposed to catch her, the moment before they collided, he suddenly jumped back. Hey, His glance averted from the woman's eyes and she crashed into the ground as if she was being consumed by the earth while becoming dot-eyed. Everyone had trembling expressions as they looked towards Hajime, who had no intentions of catching her. She's dead, right? However, after the sand of cloud cleared up again, the beautiful woman with silver hair and blue eyes appeared. Aiko and Ririana both raised out a warning-like scream.
Why are you
Everyone, get back! She's a dangerous person who kidnapped Aiko and lent Eri a hand.
Towards those words, Kuki and all the other classmates at the spot, Kuzeri and all of the other knights all simultaneously picked up their weapons. Especially Shizuku, who was close to Hajime and them, who immediately prepared to perform a quick draw on the spot. She had piercing eyes filled with murderous intent for the person who had lent a hand in Kaori's death. If an opening appeared, she would immediately cut her down. Towards the other party which glared at her, Nointo, who had a pretty face like a work of art and silver hair with blue eyes, as if she didn't suffer any damage at all from the crash, moved eagerly and easily stood up. Then for a moment she glanced at Hajime with reproachful eyes, and unbelievably, she who had no emotions or expressions like a machine now carried them, and panickingly she spoke towards Shizuku.
Wait, Shizuku-chan, it's me.
Shizuku had a suspicious expression towards the woman who called her name on their first meeting, appealing for themselves. Hajime, who was by the side, muttered out, "You look like shady scammer." The woman cayed at him with a glare, then looked away. It was impossible for Aiko and them to not think of her as an enemy. Although the appearance and voice was different, the strange woman's casual gestures and atmosphere when calling out for herself was like a shadow of her best friend. While gently relaxing her quick draw position, she spaced out and suddenly muttered the name of her best friend.
Ri? Are you Kaori?
Was she extremely glad that Shizuku had noticed that it was her? The silver-haired, blue-eyed woman had a bright face and replied in a lively, bright voice.
I'm Kaori, Shizuku-chan's best friend Shirase Kaori. Although my appearance has changed, I'm properly living.
Kaori!
Shizuku was stunned for a bit, although she has no idea how things turned out the way they did, even still with the fact that her best friend was still alive and in front of her. Finally soaking in, she embraced Kaori, who had obtained a new body of a silver-haired, blue-eyed woman, with all her might as she cried out tears like rain. Kaori was also sobbing like a baby, and like Shizuku, she embraced her back tightly and quietly whispered gently,
I'm sorry to have worried you. I'm fine now, I'm fine.
Hi, Gusu. I'm glad. So glad.
They both buried their faces in each other's necks, and Shizuku and Kaori firmly confirmed each other's existence. Everyone who saw it was completely stunned. For a while, the cries of warmth and tenderness resounded throughout the drilling grounds.
Do, for destructions of the divinities.
With eyes dyed red and swollen from tears, Shizuku's cheeks also blushed with the same amount of shame, and determined to hide her shame, she demanded an explanation of the circumstances. The current location has switched from the drilling grounds to the large room where Kuki and them usually eat at. In regards to Shizuku, it was explained that at heart she was Kaori and the body belonged to someone named Nointo. For the time being, Ririana urged that they move to a calmer place. However, it wasn't only Shizuku who came. All classmates as well as Aiko and Ririana are attending. Well, let's see, cutting straight to the chase. Using magic, Kaori's soul was protected. Nointo's corpse remains. We restored it and took it over.
I see. I don't get it at all.
Shizuku just stared at Hajime as he gave off his extremely simple explanation. From the stare, it was clearly saying, "Is that all there is to it? Ah?" With an insecure look. In place of Hajime, who had an expression that his motivation for explaining was zero, Kaori decided to explain with an amazed expression.
Eitone, Shizuku-chan. You know that the magic we're using now, a degraded version of the forgotten magic from the past called Age of Gods magic, right? Yes, I've studied some of this world's history. It's the magic that appears in the myth about how this world was created. Rather than the current attribute magic, they were more fundamental in usage. Wait, Do you mean to say that it's that kind of thing? The Age of God's magic that Nagumo and you guys have is the spirit type, a power that allows you to interfere with a person's soul? With that, the spirit of the dead Kaori was protected and settled in a different body, right?
Right, as expected of Shizuku-chan.
For some reason, Kaori was sticking out her chest proudly. In fact, the rate of Shizuku's brain being able to process things was fast. Hajime had also known of this before, but, inside of himself, he was once again impressed.
But why in that body? Was Kaori's body no longer all right? I thought that you guys could somehow manage to heal up the wound that was inflicted on her heart with recovery magic, though.
The truth is, Kaori's body is completely healed, and it was possible to return her soul to it. Spirit magic was mind-blowing Age of Gods magic where you can literally stay immortally young through continuously fixating your own soul. By fixating, it was magic which preserved the dead spirit that was interfered with in order to not allow it to deteriorate nor disappear. At first, this was what Teo performed on Kaori. However, it was lucky that Teo made it on time, because it's ineffective if several minutes have passed since death. By establishing, just as it says, regardless of the fixated spirit, they'll be established whether it's as organic or inorganic matter. Bodies which have started decaying would still cause them to die once again even if they establish themselves, because it won't be suitable for survival. However, it'll be possible with a healthy body. It's also possible to leave the wedge of time and become immortal like Mirade Raisen, who established herself as a golem. Obviously, this magic isn't so simple that it can be done without proper testing and training. It was successful precisely because Yue and Teo were naturally talented at magic. Even still, it took 5 whole days to properly establish.
Then, what happened to Kaori's original body? There must have been some kind of problem then? Shizuku-chan, calm down. I'll explain it properly.
While calming down Shizuku, Kaori continued to explain. At first, Hajime had attempted to return Kaori's spirit back into her original body, which they've healed with reproduction magic. However, the one who told him to wait was Kaori. Even while stuck in a spirit state, spirit guidance can be conducted to communicate with the soul. Kaori, who was still in a spirit state, had heard of Meiri Raisen and requested that she be placed into a golem like her. If it was Hajime, then he should be able to create a powerful golem. At Vertical Bar, Marujin Underwater Ruins Vertical Bar, Kaori had realized her own powerlessness. She had no intentions to stay the way that she was now. She also had no intentions to give up standing next to Hajime as well. At that point, she knew that she would easily be killed. Cowardly, miserably, and mortifyingly. If so then, she thought, what if I tossed away my human body? Once Kaori was resolute on something, she became surprisingly stubborn. Although Hajime and them had tried to talk her out of it, she wouldn't listen. That determination was so strong it made Hajime raise out both hands and surrender. With no other choice, Hajime had decided to create the strongest golem he could. However, suddenly the light bulb inside of Hajime's head lit up. Right, it was Nointo who Hajime had pierced through the heart. After Hajime recovered Nointo's remains, Yue used reproduction magic to restore all the wounds. The strong body of God's apostle had become Kaori's new vessel. It was a great success when establishing the soul to it. Unfortunately, although the organ-like magic stone which supplied an infinite supply of magical power was reproduced, it was not functioning, however. Nointo's inherent magic decomposition, her dual-wielding swords and skills, silver wings and feathers were usable. It appears that Nointo's body remembers all previous combat experiences and knows how to use it, although she's unable to fly right now because the body is still new. Once she gets accustomed to it, she'll likely be able to exert God's apostle's true abilities. Now that she can directly manipulate magic, she's well qualified to be shoulder to shoulder with Hajime and them. It's central to the Fubes. Kaori, who was happy that her spirit was successfully established onto the body, was an incredibly amazing sight. After all, she had the appearance of a cool beauty, and she was making a fuss with Kaori-sia noises and a big smile. The opponent, which Hajime was just fighting with not too long ago, was making such a happy face, and in addition, she was clinging on to him. As expected, even Hajime didn't know this would happen, and his eyebrows turned into a... By the way, Kaori's real body was being stored in the treasure warehouse while receiving Yue's freezing treatment. A beauty frozen in ice created a very mysterious feeling. Since cells that are ruined after being thawed out can be restored by reproduction magic, if she wanted to go back to her body, the possibility of it is extremely high.
I see. Kaori, you've always been a bit spontaneous since a long time ago, but this time surpasses all of those.
After hearing Hajime's explanation, Shizuku placed a hand on her head to suppress her headache. Her headache was worse than the time when she was asked what Hajime's favorite game was, so she visited the game store, only to have mistakenly charged into the X-rated game corner.
Sorry for worrying you, Shizuku-chan.
Shizuku said while smiling at Kaori, who had an apologetic expression. Then she suddenly straightened her posture and changed her expression to a serious one, then turned towards Hajime and them and bowed her head.
Nagumo-kun, Yue-san, Shie-san, Teo-san, Theo-san, thank you very much for saving my best friend. Although my debts are continuously increasing and I have nothing I can return in exchange, I'll never forget this favor throughout my life. If there's anything I can do, then feel free to ask. I'll do my best to respond to it.
You're as honest as ever. Ma, don't mind it so much. We just helped out our own companion. Shizuku showed a wry smile towards Hajime's light reply. It wasn't just Kaori, they were all saved as well. Their lives were saved twice at that. Even after being saved from their predicaments, most likely the results of the clash was convenient for Hajime's own circumstances as well. His state of mind was already something that you could only laugh at how different it was. And somehow the calm mood also had a hint of spitefulness in it as well, Shizuku sharply pointed out.
Considering all that, although you were also worried about me, you gave me the medicine for Kuki's sake, right?
If you had broken, then Kaori would have been troublesome.
True, troublesome, you say? That's mean, Hajime-san.
Replying to Shizuku's sarcastic remark, Kaori's Tsukomi also came through, vertical bar besides. Hajime continued. Just like a certain sensei has said, I should not walk down the lonely life. Though I can't afford to pay attention to everything, if it's just this much, then…
Nagumo-kun?
Aiko, who had kept silent while Shizuku and Hajime and them had their conversation, looked towards Hajime with moistened eyes that were overwhelmed by emotions due to Hajime's words. The other students were strangely admiring that Ai-chan's teachings properly reached Hajime, who had become overly haughty. It seems that Aiko was more impressed than they were, though. Shizuku and Yue and them sensitively felt that some other kind of heat was also included in Aiko's eyes. Kaori's appearance was like, "It can't be." Asking for confirmation, she lined her sight with Shizuku and Yue and them. Yue and them nodded with a sharp look, while Shizuku averted her eyes and looked up towards the sky. Shizuku sensed that a delicate atmosphere was beginning to build up and decided to continue talking in order to return the atmosphere back to normal. There were a mountain of things that she still wanted to ask.
On that day, the day when Sensei was kidnapped, can we hear what you wanted to tell us that day? That talk surely had some kind of relation with Nagumo-kun and them who acquired Age of Gods magic, right?
Hajime heard Shizuku's words and turned his gaze over to Aiko. Silent pressure hung over Aiko to explain the situation, while clearing out her throat, Kohon. Aiko began to explain Hajime's purpose for traveling and… She began to explain about everything from the events when she was held at the head temple and when the kingdom was invaded. After she finished explaining everything, the first person to raise their voice was Koki.
What's with that? Then, are you saying that we're just dancing on the palm of God's hand? Then why didn't you tell us about it sooner? You could have told us when we met up again at Orcus.
With a criticizing look and voice, however, Hajime only glanced at Kauki, as if he was troublesome and didn't say anything. He was ignored. Towards that attitude, Kauki got up from his seat with a dash, "Kata!" noise and was filled with hostility towards Hajime.
How about saying something? If you had told me about it sooner, then…
Wait a bit, Kuki.
Shizuku's urge wasn't heard. Hajime frowned annoyingly at Koki, who had lost his temper. After letting out a grand sigh, he looked towards Koki as if he was bothersome. If I had said it, would you have believed me?
What was that?
At any rate, you're a person who loves to believe in your convenient interpretations. Would the large majority of people believe that God has gone mad when told so? I knew it would have been meaningless to tell you about it. Far from believing in me, rather you'd criticize me instead. That kind of scene comes to mind.
Boo! But if you had explained it clearly repeatedly then...
Are you stupid? Why do I have to go through bone-breaking stakes for your guys' sakes? Surely you're not expecting that just because I'm your classmate, that I'll naturally lend my power, right? Saying such foolishness is just like a second Hiyama? Towards Hajime's glare, which was like permanently frozen ground, all of the classmates averted their eyes. But it seemed that Kuki wasn't convinced, and continued to stare severely at Hajime. Kuki didn't notice that Yue, who was next to Hajime, was looking at him with fed-up eyes, declaring, "You've been saved twice, so why are you still behaving like this?"
But if we're to fight God together from now on...
Wait, hero. When did I say I was going to fight God? Don't just decide it on your own. Naturally, I'll kill them if they come from the other side, but I have no intentions of going around to search for them, because I just want to go through all great labyrinths and quickly return home to Japan. Kuki's eyes opened up widely when those words were said.
Now, surely you don't mean to say that whatever happens to the people of this world is all right, are you? If we don't do something about God, people will continue being his plaything from now and onwards. Are you going to abandon them?
I'm not willing to use my powers for the sake of someone whose face I don't even know.
Why? Just why? Aren't you stronger than us? If you have that much power, then you should be able to do anything. If you have power, then shouldn't you use it for the right things?
Kuki was howling. As always, his words were overflowing with justice. However, such words were against the person's will to begin with. They didn't reach Hajime. Hajime looked at Kuki as if he was a stone on the roadside. If you have power, huh? That's exactly why you'll always be groveling on the ground. I believe that power should be used with clearly defined intentions. You don't do something because you have power. Because you want something, you use power. If you're saying that just because you have power, you have to do it regardless of your will, then that's probably nothing more than a curse. That will is too feeble. Or rather, I have no intentions of arguing about which path you and I take. Anything more about this will be annoying, so I'll seriously send you flying. After Hajime said that, his eyes returned to normal as if he had no interest in Koki and them. From his attitude, Hajime was serious about himself and the world. Koki realized that it wasn't out of a grudge nor hatred. He simply had no interest. After the reason why he lost was said out, he kept quiet while shaking violently. I have a strong will. He wanted to object, but for some reason those words wouldn't come out. The other classmates as well somehow understood that Hajime coming back and teaming up with them again was nothing but a dream, and they trembled violently when they thought that they might seriously end up like Hiyama if they said things poorly. After all, even though they were just puppets, their opponent was someone who held no hesitation and turned all the knights, including Meld, into chunks of meat. As for the stay-behind group, they couldn't even look Hajime in the eye after he fell into hell.
As expected, you won't be staying around? I wanted you to at least stay until the defense system for the kingdom was repaired.
The person who requested it was Ririana. As of now, confusion is still within the kingdom, although the magic formation which allowed large-scale transfer was removed. They were still in a state where it was unknown when the Majinzoku would be attacking once again, so Hajime and them were in existence which they didn't want to part with. Freed, who seemed to be the other party's general, only withdrew because Hajime was here. With just Hajime and them being here, they were already a kind of repellent. Since things were already established with God's apostle, I want to hurry up ahead. Resurrecting Kaori took 5 days as well. I plan on leaving tomorrow. Though Rihanna's shoulders dropped after Hajime and them had left, there was no way of stopping Freed and them, so as a princess, she needed to hold on to them.
Is there anything at least that pillar of light that's also one of Nabumo-san's artifacts, right? Can you allow us to use it for the kingdom's protection? I'll do everything I can to reward you for it, so...
Ah, Huberian, huh? It's impossible. That thing broke after the first blow. It was a prototype after all. If I don't improve it, then... Hajime's annihilation weapon, Huberian, that erased the huge army of demons and Majinzoku was, in short, a Summite convergence laser. Before going down vertical bar, Kamiyama vertical bar,
He flew up to retrieve it. Hyubrion was an enormous airframe lens which converged sunlight. It can also charge itself while inside of the treasure warehouse, which had heat capacity installed in it. Enormous heat, which critically overflowed from the treasure warehouse, would be discharged through the launching entrance where gravity magic was added in to make it discharge towards the ground. And Hyuberion's biggest feature was the fact that it could still converge the sunlight even while it was night. Its secret was due to Oscar Orcus's false sun, which lightened up his rooms. That thing's sunlight was created through reproduction magic, along with space magic. It was through collaboration with the Liberators who combined their Age of Gods magic, as Hajime couldn't understand at first. Even the Hajime as of now is still unable to create a fake sun. Plus, Huberion was still in its experimental stage as well. It wasn't able to withstand its own heat and broke down, so it can no longer shoot anymore. To begin with, Huberion wasn't the only annihilation weapon that Hajime had created, but
Is that so?
after hearing Hajime's words, once again Riorna's shoulders drops down. There, Kaori, Shizuku, and Aiko pierced Hajime with glares. The three people already know of Hajime's stance. Although Hajime did say that he'll consider people in his surroundings to some extent, fundamentally, the fact that he's indifferent about this world doesn't change. Reaching out towards the surroundings was so that sadness wouldn't indirectly reach Yue and them. That's why the three people didn't actually say anything. They don't, but their persuasiveness were shown in their eyes. Although Hajime had been ignoring them while drinking his tea, he let out a murmur because they were so persistent. Before we leave, I'll at least fix the Great Barrier.
Nagumo-san, thank you very much.
Hajime ignored Ririana's, not sure how I'm supposed to use this expression, expression which was shining, and with a, "Is this all right then?" He glanced towards Kaori and them. The three people as well as Ririana returned a joyful smile at Hajime. Somehow or another it's become really sweat now, he thought. Even Yue and Shia besides him were smiling at him. Vertical bar, ma. This isn't bad, I guess, vertical bar. Hajime let out a bitter smile as he shrugged his shoulders.
And where are you guys planning on heading, Nagumo-kun? If you're aiming for Age of Gods magic, then you'll be going for the Great Labyrinths, right? If you came from the west, then, is it the Sea of Trees?
Ah, that's our intent. I had planned to go via Fuyurin, but heading partly towards the south is bothersome, so I think we'll just go as is towards the east. After hearing what Hajime had planned, Ririana's expression was as if she had thought of something.
Then, will you be passing through the Empire's territory?
It'll probably happen.
If so, then, would it be all right if I tagged along as well?
What for?
There are mountains of things to talk about with the Empire about the kingdom being invaded. The messenger and ambassador have already left for the Empire, but it's best to talk about it at the earliest possible. With Nagumo-san's transportation artifact, getting to the Empire would be quick, right? That's why I was wondering if I could board as well and have a direct talk over there.
Hajime was amazed at Ririana's bold plan and how she worked her way up towards it. If he thought about it, she was the princess who, in order to get help, ran away from the kingdom and traveled through a caravan. Thinking of it, he was strangely convinced that it was natural that she would naturally think up of such an idea, and, since it wasn't much trouble to just lower her down as they went along their path, his mind consented that it was all right. However, he didn't forget to give a warning. Dropping you off is fine, but we won't be entering the Empire? We'll never accompany you to a meeting with the Emperor?
Fufu, don't say such impudent things. Just dropping me off is more than enough.
Ririana unintentionally let out a wry smile after Hajime's cautious remark. Then Kuki, who was silenced by Hajime, began to talk again.
If that's so, then we'll also tag along. Riri can't be left alone with someone who thinks nothing of this world. We'll be the guards along the way. Besides, if Nagumo doesn't plan on doing anything then, I'll save this world. For that purpose, power is needed. The power of Age of Gods magic. If we tag along with you guys, we'll be able to obtain Age of Gods magic right.
No, I'll tell you their location, so don't come without permission. If you tag along, it'll always be troublesome all the time.
What are you suddenly getting so fired up about? Hajime had an amazed expression. I guess the criticism about not relying on others wasn't understood. There, Aiko timidly points out Hajime's words from before.
But, Nagumo-kun, you said that even if we challenged a great labyrinth now, we'd be killed.
No, that was that other thing. Look, even I, who was incapable, managed to do something about it, so you guys should be fine. You can do it. You can do it. In short, you need fighting spirit.
Isn't that impossible?
Hajime irresponsibly turned his eyes away from Aiko, who completely remembered his remark. As for Hajime, the dawn when they surpassed the limits of the world was something that he didn't mind allow his classmates to get a free pass into, but helping them obtain Age of Gods magic from the first step was something he wanted absolutely nothing to do with. There was no other reason but the loss of time.
Nagumo-kun, could I ask you a favor? Just once is fine. Even with just one Age of Gods magic, it'll make a decisive difference in completing the other great labyrinths. Won't you let us follow along this once?
If you plan on leeching, then the magic won't be obtainable. It's required through actions to be accepted by the labyrinth.
Of course! Putting aside God's case for now, we're also the same in wanting to return home. We'll desperately challenge it with determined will. That's why I ask of you, being saved several times and only being able to say our thanks of repaying your kindness to you. But right now, we can't do anything but rely on you. Please lend us your power once more. Suzu's also asking Nagumo-kun. I want to become stronger and have a talk with Eri once again. So I ask of you, this favor will definitely be repaid if you take along Suzu and us.
Up until now, Aiko had listened to their unreasonable words. Only Shizuku earnestly wanted help to obtain the Age of Gods magic. Her expression was stiff and uneasy, as she felt sorry that they had to rely on them while not being able to repay their kindness. Suzu, who had kept silent for a long time, was also influenced by Shizuku and lowered her head. It appears that she had thought of various things about Eri. Her voice and expression carried desperation. Kuki's eyebrow jumped up a little in reaction to the spectacle he saw, but in the end he didn't say anything. Hajime was hesitating, normally taking along Koki and them to finish Vertical Bar Harutsuina, Sea of Trees. Vertical Bar was troublesome and unthinkable. He wanted to quickly refuse them and tell them to go to whichever they wanted out of Vertical Bar, Orcus Great Labyrinth Vertical Bar, or Vertical Bar Raisin Great Labyrinth Vertical Bar. However, this time, after his battle with Nointo, his judgment was hesitating. That was because he thought of how to eliminate Nointo as well as the influential men who were seen manipulated back in the past at the Vertical Bar Merugine underwater ruins, who will likely be a nuisance. She was a doll who was the embodiment of God's will and literally the hands and feet of God that moved around secretly behind the scenes. Then, if God's apostle Nointo was clearly created, sure enough, can we be certain that there's not more than one? It may be overly optimistic in thinking so, Nointo had said. Hajime was an irregular, and God's wish was to have him die while suffering. If so, then, sure enough, it's logical to believe that they'll send in more existences like Nointo. Assuming so, for the sake of that time, it may be a good idea to give Kuki and them some power, Hajime thought. Although it was quite evil to throw others at the enemies which were after him, Vertical Bar Ma'a, the hero has his mind set on fighting God, so there shouldn't be any problems, right? He thought lightly. In the end, he finally decided to accept their company and move towards Vertical Bar Harutsuina Sea of Trees. For the time being, he glanced at Yue and them for confirmation, and it didn't appear that they had any particular objections. Shizuku and them had a smile of relief which leaked out. Hajime was thinking about the two remaining great labyrinths that would come in the future. Regardless of what's there, the ending of these travels were coming into view. No matter the existence which blocked their path, no matter the situation that they fall in, he'll beat them by all means and return home, along with the importance that he obtained in this world. That oath renewed his desire, and included his new bonds which piled up and became even stronger. While feeling the flame of determination growing bigger within his heart, Hajime quietly smiled. The kingdom was unusually noisy as crowds of people were talking and chattering. Usually you'd express it as, everyone is lively, but if you looked at the facial expressions of the people in the kingdom, you'd notice that the majority of those people had sorrowful and dark expressions. The invasion of the kingdom was truly an unexpected event. It's been 5 days since that day. The sense of loss and sorrow still lingering in the people's chests were bringing pain to their hearts. However, that still doesn't stop them from working on the reconstruction. That was surely the strength of people. On the main street of the kingdom, which was filled with sorrow and strength, a man with white hair and an eye patch was buying something hot dog-like, because something that wasn't a sausage was inserted instead, and chewing on it as he walked towards the guild headquarters. It was Hajime Valet. Only Yue and Shizuku was by his side. After going to the guild headquarters, they were going to repair the Great Barriers. Shizuku volunteered to guide them to the artifact's location. Shia and them were house-sitting at the royal palace. It was judged that it would be better to not needlessly stimulate the people with the appearances of another race walking through the kingdom, so they volunteered to stay behind. Even if the kingdom citizens know that the ones that attacked them were Majinzokus, right now they'll likely indiscriminately target them because they aren't humans. The kingdom were high believers of the church. To begin with, besides the demi-human slaves, there were hardly any other race but humans. That's the judgment was proper. Right now, if you're just judging by appearances, then Kaori counted as human, so she was currently helping Aiko and them who were busy helping Ririana, and Teo was sleeping in order to refill the magical power she's used up continuously for the past several days.
The guild headquarters is, in the end, what do you plan on doing there?
Shizuku asked Hajime as she was also similarly chewing on a cheese-flavored hot dog. I thought I'd just send a message reporting that the request was completed. Although it's something that should be done directly with words, it'll be far too troublesome to travel from Fuyurin towards the Sea of Trees. If I send a report through headquarters, they'll properly deal with it.
By report, are you talking about that child called Mew? Come to think of it, I don't see her appearance.
After Shizuku was slightly disappointed and lowered her eyebrows, they explained that Mew was safely reunited with her mother. Was she done in by Mew's cuteness after only meeting momentarily? Vertical bar, I wanted to hug her, Shizuku muttered. However, after hearing Yue's words, her eyes opened up widely.
It's fine. You'll meet again, since Hajime will be taking her with us to Japan. Eh? Hey? Hey? What does this mean, Nagumo-kun?
What do you mean, what does this mean? It's exactly as said. I've made a promise with Mew. I said I'd take her with me to my hometown.
No, but Mew-chan is a Yumaninzuku sea person, right?
Hajime shrugged his shoulders like there was nothing wrong while Shizuku was baffled. I understand what you're saying, but it's not that much of a problem. There are lots of ways around it, and if there's none, then just make one. Isn't it often said something like, whether or not it's possible, or whether you can do it or not?
That's certainly true, but...
To begin with, isn't it too late now? Shaya's got Usamimis, and Yue's not even albino, but she has sharp canines and bright red eyes. If you look in the long term, her appearance won't change either. You probably didn't even think about it when I said that I was going to bring both of them back to Japan. As Hajime made his points, Shizuku certainly had a wry smile now. Besides him, had a faint smile on her face. She was quietly holding onto the hem of Hajime's clothes with her hand. Faintly, a sweet atmosphere began to drift. When Shizuku was hit by the atmosphere, her temperature went up a bit.
Thanks for the meal,
she said while fanning herself. And while glancing over to the side at the two harmonious people, Shizuku was convinced that whatever happens, Hajime will somehow find a way through it all, even though she had no evidence. When she thought about the steep path which her best friend was traveling on, Shizuku began to become troubled, and her eyebrows became an AN.
Are you properly looking after Kaori?
Nah, that's something you should ask the actual person herself. No matter what I say, I don't actually know how she feels. Ma, for me, just as promised, I don't intend to be cruel. Shizuku suddenly became more worried after hearing those words. If you looked at Kaori's appearance then, somehow or another she understood what the answer was without hearing it.
You overprotective guy,
she said as she looked towards Hajime. Shizuku was feeling somewhat shameful, and as Hajime showed signs of being amazed at the remarks, Yue suddenly dropped a bombshell.
'Cause he's like that he was assaulted. Hajime, hang in there.
Oh.
please wait a moment? Was assaulted. Who did to who?
Kaori did to Hajime. It seems that during the confusion she stole a kiss. Darn that Kaori.
Kaori did. No way! Right? Kaori's already gone up the stairs toward adulthood.
Before she knew it, her best friend had powered up in various meanings. Shizuku had distant eyes, and her cheeks cramped up. As if she was left behind, she began to feel lonely.
Aiko is also dangerous. Be careful, Hajime.
There's no way that's true. Hajime quickly averted his eyes away from Yue's sharp glance. He was one beat too slow in denying that possibility. Shizuku, who regained herself as the two people talked. That's right, with a sharp glance just like Yue, she thoroughly questioned Hajime.
Yao, I've got to pull all the good stuff I've read. What point is you? Somehow you're talking as if you realized it. And, Nagumo-kun, what have you done to Ai-chan?
Oi, Korra! Why are you already assuming that I've done something?
1. Ever since the day that Ai-chan came back to the kingdom, she's been acting funny. Whenever she spoke of you, she blushed. I highly doubt that it was because you repelled that large army. Something definitely happened while still at the town of Ulu. Sa, truthfully spill it out. It's an important matter of whether or not Kaori's rivals will be increasing.
No, like I said, Shizuku, who had teed it up, do you, and trying to suppress it, she began to try and get ideas out of Hajime. Then there, Yue, while expressionless, exposed it all.
They kissed. Den sky.
Naguma-kun, people like you. The other party is a sensei.
Wait, calm down. I'll explain it so. Don't grab my neck. Don't shake me. With this high-grade flag architect expression, Shizuku began to shake Hajime, and then Hajime's story of the life-saving act that was performed at Ulu was told. Due to the poison, Aiko couldn't drink the medicine on her own because the situation called for urgency. He forcefully made her drink it. Since then, it further increased when Shimizu was shot and she was rescued from the isolation tower at the head temple. With Yue adding on to it, Shizuku became convinced. Don't fall, Ai-chan.
Maia, I understand that it wasn't completely intended to happen, but, Nagumo-kun, you look as if you've somehow figured out Ai-chan's feelings. Since when have you found out?
Since the time when I was taking care of Sensei after she blew up the head temple and killed Ishtar and his group, because she was looking at me with strangely feverish eyes. It couldn't be, though, is what I had thought, but as expected, it was like that?
It's like that.
It's like that, right?
Toward Shizuku and Yue's confirmation without hesitation, the emergency, which was pushed into the corner of his mind, came up again as Hajime looked up towards the sky. What are you going to do? Is what the glances from both sides said to him. Hajime started thinking of ideas as he groaned out. Let's neglect it, is what he concluded with.
Ma, I don't think Aiko-chan will be taking on the offensive. Rather than dealing with it poorly, just leaving it as is might be better.
It's just like you said. That person's a teacher, so she has her commitments to keep. Since I'm a student, pretending that I haven't noticed it is the best course of action. Actually, it was simply too troublesome to deal with, so as Hajime said out the plausible reasons he was averting his eyes somewhat, and that fact was seen through by Shizuku, who was staring at Hajime. Shizuku's glance showed that she was through with the topic, and ate all that was left of the hot dog. Then Hajime and them finally reached the Adventurers Guild headquarters in the kingdom. The building had a feeling like it wasn't inferior in history or scale when compared with Fuyurin's branch. When the entrance opened up, there were a lot of adventurers going in and out busily. The amount of her guests in the kingdom likely shot up after the invasion after all. Hajime and them entered the guild and walked towards the 10 rows of large counters, though it was jammed-packed with adventurers. As expected, the receptionists of the headquarters showed splendid skills in their procedures, and the lines continued progressing at a fierce rate. In addition, the receptionists were all beautiful women. Right, they were incredible beauties. There was also a cute child as well. An incredibly cute child. However, I was not one to fall for such honey traps. After all, my lover was someone who wouldn't lose out in cuteness nor beauty. She was the perfect, beautiful woman. Even now, she was the happy and cute woman holding onto my hand.
There was no chance that I'd ever be fascinated by other women. That's why I was thinking that I'd want to be given a break from the traps while breaking through happily and gaily, because I really won't be fascinated by any other woman other than Yue after all.
After having enough of Shizuku's amazed expression while beside them, Hajime finally reached the receptionist. As he took out his status plate, he also took out to submit the documents, proving that Miu was safely returned to Erison. Though I've come to report a completed reguest, is it possible for the Iruwa branch to report it to the Furin branch from headquarters?
Hi, a nominated guest, right? I'm sorry. Please wait for a moment.
The receptionist tilted her neck a little in puzzlement from Hajime's words. It was a proper reaction because a nominated guest from a head of a branch would never be given out to just any adventurer. Currently, the adventurers who were doing their procedures next to Hajime were looking at him in surprise. Da-da! When the receptionist received Hajime's status plate and looked at the contents, her clarified expression was destroyed and became just like the adventurers who were surprised. And after comparing the status plate and Hajime's face numerous times, she stood up in a panic.
Are you without a doubt Nagumo Hajime-sama?
Ah, it's exactly as written on the status plate.
I'm deeply sorry, but would you please come into the reception room? On the occasion that Nagumo-sama visited the guild, we've been informed to bring him inside. I'll immediately call the guild master.
Huh? No, I just want to re-guess that the completed report gets sent to the head of the Irua branch. Besides, I've got plans to go and repair the Great Barrier after this. Please pardon me from the trouble.
That'll put me in a troubling position. I'll immediately call the guild master to come, so please wait for a moment.
With that, the receptionist disappeared into the interior, while leaving behind all of Hajime's paperwork and status plate with a speed which seemed that it could generate enough force to make a dash pew sound. Hajime became disappointed.
Yuen Shizuku patted Hajime's shoulder as if saying, Ma.
Although Hajime was told to wait for a while, he wondered if this was more troublesome and if he should just report directly to the Irua branch. As he thought this, an old man with a beard appeared with the receptionist from a while ago. When Hajime saw the old man, he was convinced. He was absolutely the kind of old man who, while tossing away his clothes to show his muscles, turned into a macho old man while raising out a shout, Funnu Ua! That old man with the weird atmosphere was definitely the guildmaster, and from the moment he appeared, the guild suddenly rapidly became noisier. When the guildmaster called out to Hajime, the commotion spread out to the entire guild. It appears that the guildmaster's name was Barusu Raputa. It was a name which somehow sounded like it'll being a person into ruins.
Somehow it wasn't as bothersome as Hajime had first expected. His glance seemed to indicate that he wanted to talk with Hajime about the report to Iruwa.
No matter which town I traveled to and whatever incidents occurred, I had a feeling in my chest that everything would turn out all right, but that was expecting too much.
Barusu Dono, won't you introduce them to me? If it's someone who's being eyed by the guildmaster, then, by all means, I'd like to become an acquaintance, especially because as a gentleman, it would not do to not greet those lovely women.
The person who said such affectionate lines while coming closer besides Hajime and them was a blonde, pretty boy. 4 beautiful women were following behind him. When the surrounding adventurers saw him, they began to whisper between themselves. The reason was because he was a gold rank adventurer named Abel. It seems that his second name was Flashblade. With that, Barusu announced that Hajime and Abel were both gold rankers. The surrounding noise became incredible in an instant, which caused Hajime to have a purely troublesome expression. Hajime was about to take Yue and Shizuku and immediately leave the guild, but Abel definitely had an interest in Shizuku and Yue, so he had no intentions of allowing them to leave so easily. Or rather, does no one notice that Shizuku was in the hero's party? While disregarding Hajime's current state, Abel called out to Hajime with a refreshed face and laughingly,
Foo, you're gold, huh? You seem quite young, though. Just what kind of hand did you play? There's no way it was a proper method, right? Since it wasn't a proper method, you can't say it out here? Huh? Sorry for not being considerate enough?
Abel was spitting out poison while smiling. At this point, Hajime had completely discarded the thought of fighting with Abel. It was because he judged that he wasn't worthy enough to be an opponent. Yue and Shizuku also realized what Hajime was thinking, and also tried to quickly leave the guild.
Ma, wait a bit. Just because I'm a real gold doesn't mean you have to run away. It's not like I'll eat you? Ma, since you might not be able to stay around, leaving is fine, but how about I go out for a meal with those girls? I'll show them what a real gold is.
So Abel says as he blocks them off. His eyes were convinced that if he invited the women, they would absolutely not refuse. However, considering what Abel's words sounded like in front of the three cheats, it sounded absolutely ludicrous. Since Barusu knew of Hajime and their true identities, his face was trembling and shaking. Oi, Yagashi. Taking care of these unfortunate pretty boys is what you're in charge of, right? I'll leave it to you, the specialist. This is just like a degraded version of Amanogawa.
Who's the specialist of what? To begin with, what are you saying about another person's childhood friend? Cookie isn't this disappointing? Surely he's not that pitiful and regrettable.
Shizuku, you say some unexpected things sometimes, but I intensely agree.
The three people were having an extremely natural conversation while being through with Abel. He's probably never received bad treatment ever since he obtained gold. The other women were also glaring scowly at Yue and them.
As expected, it was becoming a rarity, so Hajime was thinking about starting a countdown before blowing away all members that were laughing, including the guildmaster. While Hajime was having such dangerous thoughts, an unexpectedly deep voice spoke out, like a young girl called out to Hajime and them.
Arean, isn't it Hajime-san and Yue Wana-sama over there?
Hajime felt chills from the mysterious voice and immediately took a defensive stance with Donner pulled out. And the one who appeared when Hajime and them turned around was...
What is this monster? Who could ever confuse Sanchi's face for a monster?
Abel shouted out instinctively towards the mass of muscle with wide open eyes. It had thick muscle armor throughout its entire body and face, just like what you'd see in comics, and was around 2 meters in height. Yet it had its red hair tied up to make twin tails with a cute ribbon, and what they were wearing was a so-called yukata dress. There were lots of frills attached onto it. They were fluttering around a lot. The thick legs were wonderfully exposed. For a moment I had thought that it was the monster Christabel from Brooktown, but it appears to have been a different person. Unless that guy had a shape-shifting ability.
Hi, stay away. Who do you think I am? I'm the gold-ranked Flashblade Abel. If you come any closer than this, I'll cut you down here. Ma, that's terrible. To be called a monster on our first meeting and killed? You're the same gold as manager, but you're treating me gite differently. But your face is to my preference, though.
Hajime and them stiffened up from being called out by the man-woman and reminded of Christabel. Meanwhile, Abel had somehow been cornered. No, she was just there, but Sanchi was seen as an enemy and about to be cut down by Abel. The man looked towards Abel with an amazed expression as he screamed out instinctively, "She? If so, then she seems to prefer Abel's looks," and impatiently approached, with her eyes shining like a beast and while licking her lips.
I said, don't come over here, you monster.
Abel, who was unable to withstand the fear, finally pulled out his sword. It was a gold-ranked adventurer's attack. Everyone had thought that it would take the life of the man-woman, but the reality was well beyond their expectations. The man-woman who cut the distance in an instant towards Abel, while leaving an after-image, held onto Abel's sword with one hand and grabbed him as is. In other words, it was a bear hug.
Abel's body could be heard creaking out and was desperately trying to escape. However, because the restraint was formed by muscles, he wasn't able to escape. While he was struggling desperately, Abel's tragic time had begun.
Na Fufu, I'll thoroughly punish the bad child. 9.
Stop it. Don Mungu.
Abel began to break out into convulsions. After a while, the sound of a sword clanging onto the ground was heard. That sight was almost like a flower's bud being cut off. The women who were serving Abel all turned pale-faced in an instant and ran out of the guild at full speed. Afterwards, the guild as wrapped in silence, Abel was finally released and fell to the ground as if broken. No matter how you looked at it, The victim was the ruffian.
However, what was there was definitely a gold-ranked adventurer. He still retained some consciousness as he glared at the man-woman. But he immediately looked away from the man-woman and glanced over towards Hajime.
Oh, oi, you. You're the same gold, right? Then help me. Besides, although you may have obtained it through unjust means, I'll put in a good word for you. Your role is to help me. The Flashblade, it'll be an honor. Look, quickly do something about this monster, you slowpoke.
Although Hajime didn't understand why he was asking for help while verbally abusing him, but his glance was past amazement and turned into pity and regret for Abel. Incidentally, if this really is gold, then this world's adventurers are doomed? Barusu thought. Barusu shook his neck as if he was denying something. There may have been various problems with Abel being gold. And while Abel was unleashing out all kinds of unbearable insults, the one who came forwards was not the man-woman but Yue. There, Abel got the wrong idea.
Ah, you're willing to help me? Then tonight, I'll make time just for yo.
Don't open your mouth.
Hajime and Shizuku understood that Yue's voice carried anger in it. It seemed she's a bit ticked off that he was verbally abusing Hajime. While interrupting Abel's words, a black swirling orb appeared in Yue's right palm.
Be born once again, then come back, beep rascal.
Eh? Wait? Stop. Ah! Ah! Ah!
On this day, another person from this world, a man has perished, and they gave out their first cries as a man-woman. With a satisfied expression, Yue, who crushed the symbol of a man, returned to Hajime's side. If you looked at the surroundings, all male adventurers covered their crotches with both hands while slouching over and trembling. Someone within them had tears in their eyes as well. It appears that just seeing it was enough to damage them. Then, at that time, whispers began to be heard in the guild that was wrapped in silence.
Oh, oi, a blonde girl with red eyes and a white-haired boy with an eye patch. Eh? It can't be the crotch smasher. Seriously, then those two are small love. Eh? What's that? Those two horrifying names. You don't know? They're the adventurers who appeared like a comet several months ago. A blonde girl with red eyes like a rose. Don't be misled by those good looks. If you get pulled in, what awaits you is a new world. She has the appearance of a goddess, but she's also the sun-killing demon king. By her side is the white-haired boy with an eye patch, the incarnation of unreasonableness. Words never get through to him. Do not make eye contact. Do not speak out to him. Do not get into his sights. If you still want to live, that's what the minstrel who came from Brook said. In fact, even in Fuyuren and Urado, there's been Gite a lot of men's whose son were murdered to the state of being unable to recover by an unknown group. What's with that? How scary?
It appears that Hajime and Yue's names circulated even to the kingdom due to minstrels. The surrounding adventurers looked at Hajime and them in terror while shivering. If we make eye contact, we'll get done in,
they thought as they gradually distanced themselves while covering their crotch.
You guys, what exactly were you guys doing?
Shizuku looked at Hajime and Yue with an amazed glance. Yue looked indifferent, but Hajime's cheeks were cramping up grandly as the rumors of the two names spread. Then, the man-woman from a while ago called out to them.
It's been a while. I'm happy that you two haven't changed, Juan.
No, who are you? Are you Christabel's acquaintance? Hajime asked while being openly on guard towards the man-woman who winked at them. He had a slight trauma of the time when he was attacked by Christabel while leaving Brooktown. Once again, Shizuku, who also witnessed the strange scene, thought, where did the usual everyday social conversations go? Her cheeks were unintentionally cramping up as she casually withdrew behind Hajime to make him a shield.
Ara, how thoughtless of me. You wouldn't know from my appearance, Nen. I once confessed to Yue Wane-sama, and I literally suffered an honorable death as a man. But, have you remembered?
Really?
It appears that you had an idea, as she looked up at the man-woman with a shocked expression. The man-woman laughed happily as Yu managed to remember. According to his self-introduction, he confessed to Yue at Brooktown, but was immediately shot down. The people who she mainly performed a crotch smash on were mainly adventurers, and as a man-woman, he/she studied under Christabel. By the way, it seems that his/her name was Mariabel, named by Christabel.
At that time, I was truly foolish, Juan. I'm sorry, ne? Yue one sama.
N, you've become splendid. A new life should be enjoyed.
A fufu. I thought that Onisama would say that, Juan. Speaking of which, recently there have been more and more boys hoping to become Christabel's apprentices. If I remember right, it was a former black rank adventurer and some former mercenaries based in the hidden organization in Horowado. With that, the manager has to expand her shop nen. Today is the preliminary inspection.
Hajime's spine began to tingle, and his expression distorted and trembled in fear. It appears that because of Hajime and them, there were large quantities of man-woman in this world, and they were multiplying. However, Hajime hadn't noticed that Mariabel was originally an average height and built man. The rapid growth within these few months was, due to Christabel's training methods by itself, it seems to be at a monstrous level. Furthermore, from what Mariabel spilled out a while ago, Christabel was originally a gold rank adventurer. Naturally, her disciples would become extremely competent in combat. It was clear from the fight that Mariabel had with Abel a while ago. A huge, unparalleled army of man-woman, it's a nightmare. As Hajime watched Yu and Mariabel exchange conversations in a friendly manner, he renewed his determination to escape from this world as soon as possible.
You reap what you sow.
As she stood behind him, somehow or another, Hajime, who was angry, pushed Shizuku off onto Mariabel. After this, the pleased Mariabel gave Shizuku a grand hug, to the point of causing her face to turn pale. After she was separated from Mariabel, she went and garreled grandly with Hajime. At that time, the rumor ridiculing Shizuku's relationship started spreading, but it'll be omitted here. At the Adventurers Guild, Hajime had learned of a separate kind of world threat. However, he tried to ignore it as much as possible as he went to repair the Great Barrier. The place where Shizuku guided them to was being guarded by a considerable amount of soldiers. The guards turned a dangerous look towards Hajime as he approached. However, their eyes softened up immediately when they noticed that Shizuku was by his side. Thanks to Shizuku's face pass, they were easily allowed in and found a space which was made out of white marble-like stone. At the center was a magic formation with a cylindrical artifact enshrined on top of it. The artifact would normally be around 2 meters in length, but right now it was broken from the middle and its remains were scattered around. Around its surrounding was a few men, worrying till wits' end as they groaned, "Vertical bar, unvertical bar." They were most likely the craftsmen who were trying to repair the Great Barrier.
Oh yeah, if it isn't Shizuku Dono, what brings you here?
A man who was around his 60s with a fully grown mustache and carried an obvious craftsman aura called out to Shizuku as soon as he noticed. It appears to have been one of Shizuku's acquaintances.
Hello, Worupin-san. I'm just a guide. I brought along a synergist who may be able to repair the Great Barrier.
What was that? Is it by chance that boy there?
The man who Shizuku called Wurupen turned his glance over to Hajime and was clearly suspicious, but did not voice it to Shizuku. Truthfully, Wurupen was under the Hair Kingdom's direct control as the head synergist. The Great Barrier artifact was naturally an Age of Gods artifact. In the present age, attempting to repair it was extremely difficult even for the head synergist of the royal palace. So even if he was suddenly told that a boy who wasn't even 20 yet was able to fix it, it would be natural that he wouldn't be able to believe it so easily. However, Hajime wasn't concerned with those kinds of glances and passed between Wurupen and the other craftsmen towards the artifact and placed his hand onto the ruins. What he activated was mineral appraisal. I see. It should be strong if it's like this.
Foon, you're just a kid, so what could you possibly know about it?
As Hajime nodded as he understood how the Great Barrier was able to protect the kingdom for hundreds of years from foreign enemies, Wurupen grunted out from his nose in a bad mood. However, Hajime was indifferent towards Wurupen's attitude and proceeded to begin transmuting. Red sparks began to spread out around Hajime, and one after another he began to fuse the wreckage with one hand back into their original places. Towards that transmuting speed and accuracy, not only Wurupen but also his subordinates weren't able to peel their eyes away. Shizuku, who was also seeing Hajime's all-out transmuting for the first time, seemed to also have been fascinated by the red sparks which was dancing around in the white space as she mutters,
How beautiful!
Hajime, who finished repairing the Age of Gods artifact in only a matter of several tens of seconds, suddenly began pouring in magical power into it to activate the Great Barrier. The cylindrical artifact shot out light from its top, which climbed up towards the sky. Immediately afterwards, a soldier who was guarding outside rushed into the room and reported that the third barrier had revived. Shizuku told the stunned Wurupen with a wry smile that Hajime came from the same world as she did. Vertical bar? No wonder, Wurupen and them said with a convinced face. Incidentally, when she told them that the black katana which fired them all up before was made by Hajime, their eyes suddenly sparkled and shined like beasts. Hajime disregarded them and continued to quickly walk towards the next artifact's location. However, Wurupen and them with their massive craftsman spirits knew that they couldn't just easily let go of a synergist who was above them.
Please wait a moment. An apprentice. By all means, please take us in as your apprentices.
Ooh, wow. What's with you guys suddenly? Or rather, don't cling on to my feet! You're creeping me out! Wuropen was appealing to become Hajime's apprentice as he clung onto his feet. In addition, Wuropen's subordinates began to one by one cling onto Hajime in order to not let him escape. While genuinely being disgusted from the bottom of his heart that he was in such close contact with such hairy men, Hajime tried to shake them off of his leg, but they had firmly gripped on, so it was hard to get them off. Since there was no helping it, he activated Thunderclad, which caused everyone to go, and he broke free. Even still, the craftsmen crawled and reached out with their hands. As expected, even Hajime couldn't ignore them and set out a clear reason to decline them. Look here, I'll be immediately leaving this place, and I have no plans to return to the kingdom either. Having apprentices is also very troublesome as well. First of all, even if you became my apprentices, I wouldn't have anything to teach you guys.
But you easily repaired the artifact and even made Shizuku Dono's black katana as well. We have absolutely no idea how to create something like that at all. If you're willing to teach us, then...
No, it wasn't just transmuting magic. It was also creation magic. A magic which you guys aren't capable of is required.
That can't be.
Wurupen and them exhaustively dropped their shoulders towards Hajime's words. Truthfully, the Great Barrier artifact was also created with space magic through creation magic. The Barrier of the Kingdom was a special type which intercepted space. A normal synergist wouldn't be able to repair it. Of course, since space magic was ingrained into the ores, if you steadily repaired it, it's likely that you'd be able to repair it to some degree, but not until perfection. Disregarding Wurupen and them who hung their heads. When Hajime tried to once again go towards the location of the other artifact, Wurupen and their eyes sharpened up again.
Still, it doesn't change the fact that you have excellent transmuting skills. By all means, take us in as apprentices.
How persistent. Such fearsome craftsman spirit. It wouldn't be good if he didn't compromise. In the end, while Hajime was repairing all of the artifacts, Wurupen and them, who were supposed to be the kingdom's synergists, were sticking on to him and crying like babies. Furthermore, was it because they heard of the rumors? Those who gathered weren't just the synergists at the scene. Eventually, Hajime was being crowded as they tried to learn his techniques. Hajime, who was close to wit's end, was beginning to fling the craftsmen far away into the distance, but they got up like zombies as they tried to learn of the secrets to his transmuting and crowded around him once again. As expected of the craftsmen and their desires to reconstruct the kingdom, Hajime was planning to escape, but it appears that they were communicating through the craftsmen's network in the kingdom. Wherever he went, they appeared, and asked limitless questions. It appears that until they learn of everything, they have no plans to stop clinging or leaving. As expected, even Hajime was shrinking back from it. While being bombarded with questions, Hajime finally planned to seriously escape and created the game of tag that all craftsmen in the kingdom participated in. Damn, what's happening here, even though I'm using hide presence?
Those kinds of things are useless against our craftsman intuitor. We can clearly feel you, Nagumo Dono's passionate pathosis. Ha! Ha! The presence of techniques. We can hear the gasping voice of the amazing technigas.
The craftsmen were equipped with a different kind of institution which surpassed Hajime's. While having a cramped cheek of not wanting to be touched, he seriously thought over if he should pull out Donner and Schlag or not. In the end, the escaping and pursuing drama caused great confusion because the craftsmen had disappeared from their reconstruction sites. When it finally reached Ririana's ears, the royal family intervened and restored control in the situation. Yaigashi, couldn't you have helped me out? You were acquainted with them, right? Hajime had returned to the royal palace as if tired out from something. Once he returned, he treated himself to tea while staring and complaining at Shizuku. Yu was also next to Shizuku. When Hajime came back, she quickly prepared the tea. It was exactly something a lover would do, having to look at the army of craftsmen who were approaching with bloodshot eyes and panting out, "Vertical bar, ha 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 ha, Jay." They returned back to the royal palace first, while averting their eyes from Hajime's. She was a wonderful lover.
Don't say such ridiculous things. The case with the black katana was already in uproar, but that's exactly why I knew that it was impossible to stop them who had flames within them.
Hajime, thanks for the good work.
Shizuku made an excuse while looking away, and Yue drank tea while patting Hajime on the head. When Hajime hugged Yue tightly, as is, he carried her like a princess and sat down on the opposite seat of Shizuku.
What is it, I wonder? These smoldering, irritated feelings, even though Yue took the same actions as me.
Ha? There's no reason you and Yeigashi are on the same level, is there? If you're the other party, then I'll get angry. If it's Ye, then it's no problem.
Oh, Yue is your lover after all. I get what you're saying, but right now I want to hit you so badly.
Towards the obvious difference in treatment, even though she understood that she'd naturally get done in, a blue vein appeared as she became angry. It was the same concept of becoming angry at lovers who were flirting in front of her, even if she knew they were lovers. Yu, who was on his knee, began to say, "Vertical bar, AN, vertical bar," to Hajime, with the snacks that came along with the tea. "I'm in your way, huh? I'm a bothersome insect, huh?" With twitching cheeks, Shizuku was thinking about escaping to where Kaori was, but suddenly, the door to their room was flung open with a dash. "Ban!" Song without being knocked on. What is it? What was reflected in Hajime and their sights was a 10-year-old blonde-haired, blue-eyed pretty boy, and he glared at Hajime while Dash Kiings. Moreover, did he not like that Yue was sitting on Hajime's lap? After seeing Yue for a moment, his eyes became further enraged, which seemed to contain 2 times the anger from before.
Was it you? The scum who adjusted Kaori? Moreover, even though there's Kaori, those kinds of things, I won't forgive it. I'll definitely never forgive you.
The person appearing and saying such things was the prince of this country, Randell S.B. Hairhigh. Randell clenched his fist and ran towards Hajime, while letting out a courageous, "Shout you! 0-0-0-0." His mind was filled with giving Hajime a beating. Although Hajime didn't understand what was going on, for the time being he decided to pick up a sugar cube that was prepared for tea on the table and flicked it in opposition. The sugar cube, which flew out at impossible speeds, accurately hit Randell in the forehead. "Higu!" He let out a strange scream as his head was flung back onto the floor. The pain of his forehead and the back of his head caused him to roll around with his hands covering his head. After writhing in pain for a while, he got back up and dashed Ki at Hajime as he glared and rushed in again. Therefore, Hajime let loose the second shot. "Dash Bachikon!" sounded out as Randell's head was flung backwards. The sugar cube was crushed and scattered into the air as if dancing, and Randell was forcefully performing a backflip due to the sheer power and fell onto the ground once again.
You're Your Highness. How dare you do that to His Highness? We'll beat and cut you.
Protect His Highness. From the door that Randell flung open, some old men who were guard-like came running in and charged at Hajime. Of course, in one rotation, the sugar cubes were accurately fired into all members' foreheads. In another sense, they were all artistically kneeling together. However, Randell and the old men were guide tenacious. They glared at Hajime as they tried to stand back up. While thinking that they had some nice guts, Hajime grabbed the whole bottle filled with cubes and fired them all after taking them out. An impossible sound ranged out, and sugar cubes were flipped out like a machine gun from Hajime's hand. Randell and them were writhing on the ground like a bad marionette performance. Although damage was kept to a minimum because they were just sugar cubes, it doesn't change the fact that it still hurt. Shichuku became absent-minded with her jaw dropped down, finally regained her composure and restrained Hajime. The room had already been filled with sobs of sorrow. After Hajime stopped firing sugar cubes because he ran out, he stared at Randell, who had his legs arranged as if he was a woman who was assaulted by a thug and had his face buried into the floor while crying in sorrow. It appears that his heart broke after taking on Hajime's relentless attacks. The surrounding old men rushed up towards him and were saying, "Your Highness, the wounds are shallow." Jay, in order to comfort him. Then, Ririana appeared at that timing. Shizuku was scolding Hajime that he went overboard. Yue, who was on top of Hajime's lap, was calmly eating and chewing on the tea cakes. Hajime, who was receiving a warning from Shizuku, was indifferently drinking his tea, and Randell, who broke down into tears, and the old men who were trying to cheer him up as he cried. When Ririana saw them, she understood the situation and covered her eyes with one hand as she looked up towards the sky.
It appears that I was too late.
Princess Hime-san, huh? I don't know what it's about, but your blood brother seems to be emotionally unstable. Won't you quickly reclaim him? Ririana's eyes seemed to want to say, "It's probably your fault, right?" But certainly it was also because Randell suddenly went out of control under false charges. She gave a deep sigh and helped Randell get up. The cause why Randell charged at Hajime was obviously due to Kaori. The completely changed Kaori body caused Randell to be surprised, and he asked for the reason why she's become like that. From the results, it appears that he understood that it was because of Hajime-kun. Furthermore, due to Kaori's expression while talking about Hajime being exactly like a maiden in love, he finally realized who his true enemy was. And a guy who tossed away Kaori's original body can't possibly be a good guy. Once he convinced himself, he began to rush in and witnessed Hajime embracing another woman while Kaori was yearning for him in her heart, which caused him to hit his boiling point in anger. Randall had intended to challenge and rescue the trapped princess from the demon lord Hajime, but the results were as shown presently. Far from giving a beating, he wasn't even able to get close and treated as a minor hindrance. It was pathetic and mortifying, so tears finally started flowing out. While being picked up into Ririana's arms, Randell suddenly cried out, "A new older sister," and clung on to her, looking at his state, as expected even for Hajime. "Did I overdo it?" he thought as he scratched his cheek. Shizuku was piercing him with an amazed glance at his childishness. But Randell's misfortunes have not yet ended. Immediately after he buried his face into Ririana's chest, Kaori entered the room.
His Highness Randall and Riri as well. Wait, what's wrong, Your Highness? You're crying so much.
Kaori! No, this is... It's not like I wanted to be comforted by my sister.
Randell quickly separated from Ririana and desperately made excuses. In front of the woman who he liked, he couldn't bear to say that he was a boy who wanted to be comforted and held by his older sister. However, Kaori understood the rough situation from Shizuku and Ririana's expression, and from Randell's crying and Hajime's attitude, and she finally dropped a bomb, after a long time.
Geez, it's Hajime-kun, right? Who made His Highness cry. It's not good to bully a younger child.
No, it's because he suddenly tried to beat me. I just patted him a little. He was actually being serious, but not even being a threat to Hajime, Randall fell into shock. However, the most damaging part was that it was judged that he was naturally being bullied. Suppressing his chest, he groaned out, "Vertical bar, goo, vertical bar."
Patting him. Did you properly hold back? His Highness is still a child after all.
After having been treated like a child from the woman who he liked, Randall, who was humiliated by the assumption, further suppressed his chest. I only flicked some sugar cubes? There's probably hardly any damage. As expected even, I wouldn't go around shooting a child.
But he was holding on to Riri, wasn't he? Moreover, his forehead is reddening. Even though he had such a cute face, His Highness is a bit quick to assume and tends to run out of control. But at the bottom of it all, he's a good child, so if possible, I'd like it if you could properly choose your opponents.
She was completely aware that he was comforting himself with Riri, while being evaluated as cute as a man, having his bad points pointed out that his older sister continually noted, and furthermore being treated as a child. Randall's knees suddenly gave out and he fell onto the ground on all fours. Ara-ra! Riri had a troubled smile, but Shizuku and the old men, "Please stop already, His Highness's life points are already at 0, seemed to be raising out bitter voices within themselves. However, Kaori didn't let up. She worried about Randall, who suddenly fell and called out anxiously.
Your Highness, are you all right? As expected, the spot where you were hit was too much.
No, I'm not injured. Rather than that, Kaori, what does Kaori think about me?
Randall, who was covered in wounds, decisively heard Kaori's feelings.
For His Highness? Let's see. Sometimes I become envious of Rear. I also want a naughty younger brother like His Highness.
Gufu, younger brother?
The bomb that was dropped with a smile gave additional damage to Randall. Shizuku and the old men were thinking, why would you purposely pour salt onto the wound like that? With a face that seemed to want to cry, it seemed that Randall's eyes had no more strength to withstand it. However, even if he's small, Randall is a man. He can't afford to stop here. Over the past few days, he cried a lot from the news of his father's death, was helped up by his mother and older sister, and had just sworn in front of the grave to be strong. Now that the king of this country was gone, he needed to lead it. He can't afford to be stopped by this level of pain.
Then, is that kind of guy good? What's so good about that guy?
Rindle stared and dashed keyed at Hajime. It was as if he was appealing and implying, "Open your eyes, Kaori. You should already know who's better." Hajime firmly held onto Yue from behind as Randall stared at him. From Randall's view, he was likely the worst person a woman could fall for. However, Kaori's reply was obvious.
Huh? What's with that, Your Highness, suddenly? Mo, it's embarrassing. But, Fufu, let's see. That person is the person I love. If you ask me what about him I liked then, everything, I guess. Fufu.
And that gave the final blow to Randall. Once again, Randall looked down and trembled greatly while still on all fours. Although Kaori was worried and about to rub his back with her hand and call out to him, Randall suddenly got up and rejected Kaori's hand as he bolted towards the entrance. And he turned around once he reached the door.
I hate the likes of you.
He cried out loud and ran off. As he left, the shining thing at the corner of his eyes probably wasn't their imaginations. From a distance, "Wah!" It was not understood if it was a cry or a courageous shout, but it was clearly heard. After Randall's sudden escape, the dumbfounded old men, "Your Highness!" they shouted as they left the room to chase after Randall. That's youth for you.
Hi? I'm more like personal affairs. You've made him cry.
No, Ma, Matt, that's right. But the one who dealt the finishing blow was Kaori, right?
Cool. I can't refute that.
Hajime muttered out as Randall's first love dispersed like the petals of cherry blossoms and Shizuku added in a tsukumi. Kaori was wondering what was going on and about to run after Randell, but Ririana stopped her. Ririana knew that sooner or later Randell's first love would come to an end. She had intended to comfort her younger brother by sleeping together with him for tonight. Randell was someone who will soon become the king of this country. He should be able to shrug off one or two unreguted loves. When Rihanna firmly closed the door that was left open, she walked towards Hajime, and them along with Kaori. It appears that, rather than chasing after Randell, it seemed like she had something to talk about with Hajime and them. Rihanna took the seat next to Shizuku. Kaori was locking arms in hand-to-hand against Yue while trying to sit on Hajime's opposite knee, which caused them to look like they were pro-wrestling. If it were her original body then, Kaori wouldn't be able to stand up against you because she was able to strengthen her body through direct magic manipulation, while Kaori was a support type. However, because of the Apostle's body, she's well able to compete now, more like she seems to be the one who was pushing.
Kaori, you become so strong.
No, Shizuku. Stop being impressed and stop them.
Ririana Tsukumiya Shizuku, who had a slightly lonely expression while making her remark. Since there was some shock when Kaori died once, Shizuku was slightly becoming a regrettable person when regarding Kaori. There's no way they could have the class's #1 person with the most common sense turn into a regrettable character so. Hajime gave Kaori a strong flick to the forehead, which forced her to sit on the seat besides them.
It's unfair that it's only Yue.
Fufu, I won't give up Hajime's knee.
Added. No, I'd like to begin the talk soon, but...
Ririana called out coyly. However, no one paid any attention to her.
Hajime-kun.
Don't look at me with those eyes, Kaori. You're sitting next to me, isn't it fine?
I guess it can't be helped then. I'll give you my hand. Eh? Really? Then, I want you to caress my cheeks just like how you do it for Ye. Or is it no good?
If it's just that much, then I don't mind.
Thanks, Hajime-kun. Asked. I'll wait then. Waiting should be fine, right? Yes, I'll wait no matter how long.
Rihanna, who completely missed her timing to talk, vertical bar I, even though I'm a princess, it's like I'm air with tears. Shizuku intervened as she couldn't stand it any longer, and finally, Hajime and their pink barrier was removed. Was a bit of Kaori also a part of it? It seems to have been stronger than usual. Is it proof that Kaori's single-minded pursuit was overcoming Hajime?
Back to what I was saying. Just as Nagumo-san asked, I've spread the rumors about the truth of the church's teachings, but unexpectedly, it seems to be going rather well. As expected, Aiko-san. No. Goddess of fertility seems to have been effective.
I see, Ma'a. People will believe in what they want to believe in. People will naturally get taken and the more it dramatically shakes their hearts. I expected that they'd believe it all without any problems. All that's left is to wait to see the actual effects. There's no knowing what'll happen after all.
That's right. But it's still hard to believe. What we've believed for years have been nothing but a fantasy, my individual stance aside. It's inevitable that a panic will start in the public. As someone from the royal family, Nagumo-san's proposal was a godsend.
Ririana bowed and thanked Hajime with a complex expression. Shizuku leaned her neck to the side and asked, vertical bar, about what? What Hajime and Ririana were talking about was an explanation for the head temple's collapse to the people. It's not possible to keep it under wraps forever. The royal palace needed to explain it eventually. However, according to the truth, the Ahito-sama, which everyone believed in, only saw them on the level of being toys and was a bastard who loved war, because everyone in the head temple of the church were a bunch of fanatics. They were all blown up to bits. If that was said, it would only cause a panic to occur. There, Hajime prepared a draft to explain the details and asked Rihanna to explain it to the people based on what he had written on it. Its contents were reason. An evil god who wished for a war had brainwashed the church members and caused the kingdom to be invaded. Reason, Aiko, who was sent by God, was anxious of the situation and fought voluntarily. Reason, the church members risked their lives and fought along with God's apostles and died as martyrs in the end. Reason, in order to protect the kingdom, Aiko's sword of light poured down, is what it said. It's not true, but it's not a lie either. It was roughly correct. With that, Aiko, as the goddess of fertility, will further. The evil god may have used Ehito-sama's name for our own sakes. The true God that we believe in, we shouldn't be something that we automatically believe in. We must become humans who are able to think for ourselves and decide when to take action for God. What's right? You must act upon your own judgment. That is what our true God believes in, and for those of the church who died as martyrs, have that kind of speech later at the memorial ceremony. In other words, Hajime created a false evil Ehito, who was mistaken for the true good Ehito. The goddess of fertility's speech will be the wedge which will plant recognition into the people's hearts. Even if Ehito's name was being talked about, whether it was the evil Ehito or the good Ehito wouldn't be distinguishable by the people, which would in turn make them think about what they should really believe in themselves. This way, they're able to suppress the public panic of telling the truth that everything that they've believed from when they were born was nothing more than a fantasy, and also, it may become a source of resistance against God in the future. It's only a possibility, though.
I see now. Nagumo-kun is actually thinking about a lot of various things, huh? The talk about God too, leaving it up to Aichan to tell the story, and about today's things?
Did you mistaken me for some kind of muscle for brains or something? Ma, I thought of it on the spot. Since it doesn't take much time or effort, I decided to do it just this once, although we laid down the foundations.
Phew, I didn't particularly think you were a muscle for brains. I'm saying that you're reliable. Just accept it as a compliment.
Hajime shrugged his shoulders towards Shizuku's words. Shizuku glanced at such a reliable Hajime. Somehow the exchange's dispositions were shown. Yue and Kaori were both piercing their eyes onto Shizuku. Shizuku, who noticed, suddenly began to shake. What? What is it? Jay, she asked Yue and them.
What do you think?
And it's still fine. It's still at the friend level.
Right. Still. Huh.
And we need to be cautious.
Yue and Kaori were whispering to each other as they consulted about something. It made Shizuku feel extremely discomfortable, and Ririana became air once again. Hajime looked at Yue and them with an amazed expression as if saying, "What are you guys talking about?" Evening. The red sky was spreading. People's shadows were growing thin as it stretched. The shadow of a person stood still in front of a huge stone monument made from the stones from the mountain range at the northwest of the royal palace.
I'm sorry.
Right. The shadow of the person muttering was Aiko, the monument towering in front of her, a so-called monument for the faithful who died in battle, a tower which symbolized praise to the souls who died while loyal to their country. It was for the people killed in action and victims who carried out their duties out of loyalty towards the kingdom. Their names were carved here without exception. Even now there are lots of flower offerings and mementos left by people in front of the monument for those who have died. Right now, although it's unconfirmed how many people's names were carved onto the stone, but Meld's name will also be added onto here. Aiko gently placed weapons within the mementos left behind. It was the damaged Western sword and spear. It was the artifacts of Aiko's students who passed away Daisuke Hiyama and Reiichi Kondo.
I voiced out my confession while alone. Just what should I be conflicted with? That I wasn't able to bring back Hiyama and them back to Japan, or because one of my students caused many people to die, or everything including what I've done.
While Aiko was looking down with a dejected atmosphere, she remained standing as if she was enduring something. Za. Footsteps resounded. The violently echoing sound was likely to purposely inform others of their own existence approaching. Usually he wouldn't make such noises. Aiko was startled and raised her face towards the sound.
Nagumo-kun.
What a coincidence, sensei. What was making that noise earlier was Hajime. His eyes were lightened up by the shine of the setting orange sun and stared right at Aiko. He had flowers in his hand. It's obvious to understand that he was there to offer flowers as tributes. Aiko showed a slightly unexpected expression towards his actions. Hajime noticed that Aiko's expression and guessed that she was probably wondering what he was planning on doing. With a wry smile, he placed the flowers onto the floral tribute stand.
Even I feel like mourning for the dead people a bit, Sensei.
Eh? No. I mean, I don't particularly.
Hajime suddenly talked to Aiko in an unexpectedly regrettable voice, which caused Aiko to be shaken and tried to deceive him by waving her hands back and forth in a hurry. Then Hajime shrugged his shoulders like it was a joke and stood silently by Aiko. As Aiko fragrantly glanced at Hajime, it appeared that Hajime was looking up at the huge stone monument and didn't particularly care about Aiko. He didn't seem to have any signs of talking either. Somehow, silence suddenly fell into the area, and Aiko decided to reluctantly start a conversation.
Those flower are. Is it for Hiyama-kun in them?
There's no way of that happening. It's for Meld. Hajime raised an eyebrow and plainly replied at the wrong guess.
For Meld-sen.
Though we weren't acquainted that much, I don't particularly hate people of his nature. Contrary to his position, he worry-guide a lot, failed a lot, and was always trying to improve himself. Although I'm only offering flowers, it's more along the feelings of how regrettable towards the people.
Nagumo-kun, that's right, huh?
Towards Hajime's words, Aiko's expression suddenly turned gentle. Even though Hajime mercilessly killed his enemies, he still had the proper feelings to mourn for a person's death, so Aiko became happy at that. Her cheeks naturally loosened up that he purposely took the time to come and bring an offering. Actually, Yue and them were taking a bath. I ran away when the women gave off a carnivorous glare in their eyes of wanting to take me into the bathroom with them. Since there was still time, I became free. When I by chance glanced at the flowers being displayed in a vase, I thought, how about killing time by offering flowers? And I pulled some flowers from the vase, but although my feelings about regret for Meld was real, I couldn't actually tell the truth. Hajime was taking in the circumstances of the surroundings and frowned at Aiko, who loosened her cheeks. You're not going to blame me.
Eh?
Towards Hajime's sudden words, Aiko tilted her neck. That thing about Hiyama, the circumstances were different from Shimizu's case. It appears that he was eaten by a demon in the end, but I was the one who pretty much killed him. I killed another of Sensei's beloved students. Again? Kondo as well, although he was already dead. The one who pretty much destroyed his shape was me. I had thought that Sensei would have hit me once or twice out of anger. Aiko's smile was erased and she looked down once again. Hajime was silent. He wasn't pressing her for an answer. How much time was spent silently? Before long, Aiko began to gradually voice out her words.
To be honest, I can't easily give out a clear answer. I don't believe that it can be forgiven that Hiyama-kun killed Shirasaki-san, but if possible, I would have liked that he live out his life to atone for those sins. It was shocking that Kondo-kun turned out like that. But I can understand why Nagumo-kun was enraged and showed your strength. An important person was killed in front of your eyes. With that, although it's against what I'd ideally want, you couldn't do anything but vent out your anger on them. Besides, I don't have the qualifications to blame Nagumo-kun.
Aiko crossed her arms and rubbed them both. It was as if her body was getting cold and she was trying to keep warm. Were you talking about what you did at the head temple? A silent confirmation. Temporarily, although Aiko's mind's balance was broken, Hajime and Teo had somehow reverted it back to normal with reproduction magic. Once again, it appears that her mind is being worn down by her sense of guilt and ethics. If you looked carefully under her eyes, you'd notice that she had dark circles that she tried to cover up with makeup. It was clear that she wasn't able to sleep for the past several days. It's possible that she was having nightmares. Silence descended down once again. Hajime didn't say anything and stood still. Was she unable to endure the atmosphere anymore? Aiko asked Hajime while lacking drive.
Is it not painful for you, Nagumo-kun?
Killing people? I don't particularly think it's painful. I think that part of me probably broke when I fell into the abyss. That's why I can't sympathize with you. Towards Hajime's words, Aiko's face distorts in bitterness. Something important in Hajime was broken, and, in a single strike, Aiko's state of mind further tightened up.
No one blames me.
Eh? Aiko leaked out her voice as if she couldn't endure it.
No one blames me. The eyes of the children in our class doesn't look at me any differently. As for the kingdom's citizens, they were looking at me with praise.
That was a fact. All classmates had a strong impression from Hajime, who was too gruesome in his battle. They didn't really have much feelings about Aiko's assistance in homicide. Rather, they were under the impression that Aiko fought for herself and took on the brunt of the load for their sakes. The kingdom aristocrats and government officials were thankful that the brainwashing problem was solved.
Though I've talked about it all to David-san and them, even they wanted a bit of time to think about and left it rather than immediately blaming me, even though I robbed them of their important things.
Blood dripped from her lip that she bit. Aiko probably wanted to be blamed for it. The act of killing a person is heavy. As long as they're not a maniac or rotten person, normally their minds would be hurt by the blades named guilt and ethics. So for such people, taking the blame and accepting the punishment are in a sense a kind of salvation. Aiko herself probably unconsciously seeked for that. However, that wasn't given to her. Although Hajime can agree that she played a part in overthrowing the church, he believed that even without Aiko, Teo would have still somehow managed to exterminate them some way or another. He thought that bearing the burden alone was a bit much, so as if he was troubled, he scratched his cheek as he opened his mouth. Even if you say that, Sensei, the direct cause was due to Teo's breath. Sensei only helped out a little. I don't think you should take on the burden as if everything was your fault.
Those kind of things don't matter. I certainly understood the possibility of them being killed, but I still helped Teo-san. That's no different than directly murdering them.
Unexpectedly, Aiko gave out her rebuttal strongly. Aiko herself probably felt ashamed that she raised her voice as she shrank down apologetically. Looking at Aiko with a side glance, after a moment of silence, Hajime calmly asked, "Do you regret it?"
No, at that time I was resolute with Teo-san because I couldn't overlook what the church was doing to help you. If that was left alone, then the students would surely have had terrible experiences. That's why.
While Aiko was holding back a painful voice, she replied that she had no regrets. At that time, when she looked at Ishtar and them who had cornered Hajime, not just for Hajime but also for the sake of her students to not have to fight, her resolution to dirty her hands was real. Even now, that was still unshaken. However, she was suffering while carrying the people who she's killed on her back. It wasn't something that reasoning could solve. Why did a teacher like Aiko reveal such heavy feelings to a student like me, even though I only came here to kill some time? And, suddenly, I recalled Aiko's feelings that Yua and Shizuku pointed out earlier in the day and worried if that was the cause. It appears that I was leaving Aiko's student category in full blast. Hajime's eyes were wandering around. He was completely looking for words. About Sensei, will you still be a sensei from now on? Towards Hajime's abrupt gestion, Aiko's expression unintentionally became blank, and she remembered that she was asked the same gestion once before. At that time, she should have answered with confidence, "Vertical bar." Naturally. Now she was unable to immediately answer. That was because she guestined herself. If she should declare herself as a teacher after having killed people, Aiko was tightly clenching her teeth and her expression distorted. He understood that Aiko was having an extreme conflict whirling within her mind. As if he expected it, on behalf of Aiko who couldn't answer, Hajime began to talk. If Sensei says that she'll continue being our sensei from now on, will you listen to my selfishness as a student?
Selfishness, is it?
Aiko, who had a bad complexion and seemed to collapse at any moment, showed a perplexed expression from the words that came out of Hajime's mouth. Yeah, my selfishness. Hajime removed his sights from the monument while nodding and faced Aiko to match their eyes together. As she was being stared at, Hajime, from somewhere within her, warmth was starting to well up, and as if attracted by it, Aiko also stared back. After Hajime confirmed that he was firmly reflected in Aiko's eyes, he slowly said his words, exactly as Hajime said before. They were hopelessly selfish words. Sensei, I want Sensei to feel guilty about it. I want you to shoulder its weight, justly fighting, justly shouldering it, justly suffering, and justly complaining,
To be human-like is slightly dazzling. I'm already unable to feel anything. After all, you'll be a good example for me to not forget my humanity. So that's why, continue shouldering it from now on. I'll properly watch such a human-like sensei after all. If I do so, then even after I return to Japan, I'll be able to live humanely.
Nagumo-kun.
Aiko's eyes opened up widely towards Hajime's words. She would have never thought in her dreams that he'd not blame her nor cheer her, but instead tell her to continue suffering from now on. But towards that selfishness, in a sense, made her remember the shock which came from killing as it formed ominous clouds within Aiko's heart. The results of her determination and actions were serious. All the more, it was painful as well. She wanted to run away and almost became broken. Her natural character made it extra painful because she was determined and resolute. But when she looked at herself, she had people who were willing to help her. The important things that were lost, there's a person who can't feel but remember them.
Ah, how very selfish. What mercilessly gentle selfishness.
A transparent drop ran down Aiko's cheeks. Everything she's endured up until now in order to not cry easily crumbled. As Aiko was shedding tears, Hajime averted his glance and turned his back as he troubled conveyed his last words. Times when it's so painful that it seems like you'd break, by all means, since there's no one here. Since there's really no one here so it won't be embarrassing, I'll lend you my back.
Really, people like you are...
I'll pretend that I didn't notice that Aiko was crying, is what Hajime seemed to say as he showed his back. Aiko approached while smiling and crying and buried her face into his back.
Then, I'll be borrowing it for a bit. Nagumo-kun.
All right, sensei. Aiko's cheeks loosened up because of Hajime's casual answer, and she entrusted her body. While shedding tears as if they were everything she saved up, she once again vowed. In other words, she'll continue being a teacher, and continue shouldering her sins. If a selfish student would be watching her then, she felt like she'll be able to do her best. The shadow of the two people expanded towards the east. As the night fell, the sounds of sobs resounded for a while. After this, Hajime returned to the royal palace along with Aiko after she had finished crying, but while blushing randomly and looking down shametfully, Aiko was gracefully walking beside Hajime. To be honest, this may have done it. It goes without saying that he was breaking out in cold sweat. And sure enough, Yue and them noticed, and it's needless to say what happened when he was taken into their room. About this case, Shia and Nemenai Yue's silent, expressionless stare in particular was the most painful. It should be noted that they coincidentally met up with David and them of the Temple Knights as they returned to the royal palace, but it appears that, in the end, their love for Aiko won. To begin with, the reason why they accompanied Aiko as guards was due to various senses of values, but after being forcefully pulled away from Aiko when they returned to the kingdom and was forced to descend the mountain without being confirming her safety made them start harboring doubt for the people of the church. Although they were considerably shocked when the truth of the church and God was revealed, as expected, they still came to the conclusion that they couldn't hate Aiko. Although they kinda had a feeling of complete desperation hanging around them, from now on, while believing in the goddess of fertility, they decided to revive and serve to protect the kingdom as knights. Thinking about it again, it felt as if they carried a strange, sublime feeling of love for Aiko, but surely they had lots of things to think about as well.
Enough already! Really, geez! Okay.
Hajime-kun, please be a bit more cautious. Foo. As expected of Master to deliver the final blow after we just looked away for a moment.
In the dining room of the royal palace while eating dinner, Shias and their voices resounded out as if blaming something. Hajime, who it was being directed at, was just enjoying the meal in front of him as if it was someone else's problem. Although Yue, who was sitting to his right, wasn't saying anything, her eyes looked at him as if she was looking at a troublesome person. When they heard of the circumstances, vertical bar ma, guess it couldn't be helped Tenja, is what they thought. Clearly the feelings that Aiko has for Hajime inside of her was complex due to the fact that he was her student. Moreover, after hearing Hajime's stance of neglecting Aiko's treatment, they somewhat harbored feelings of sympathy for Aiko.
Hajime, does it seem like Aiko will be able to endure?
Because they heard of the contents from Hajime, Yue was slightly worried and asked. As opposed to it, Hajime stopped eating and seemed to be thinking a little. Nan, it's not all right? Worst case scenario, if it looks too dangerous, I'll have to create an artifact to stabilize her mind using spirit magic. Even if we don't worry about it, with time, that person will be able to digest it innately.
I see. That's good.
As Yue's eyes loosened up, Hajime also smiled.
As expected of, Yu-san. With just one step, she gets ahead by 2. Is this the difference between her and me? Ku, I won't lose! I won't lose! Umu, should it be called naturally or something? It was a technique which touched Master's heart as if completely natural. If I had to say it, it's a godly skill. Obediently allow me to praise you.
Unwillingly evaluated.
Shia, who was looking at her with a terrified expression, Kaori, who looked mortified, and Teo, who was feeling admiration. Yua's expression became bitter after being unexpectedly evaluated. Hajime smiled wryly as he stroked Yua's hair. Among Hajime and his companions, in a sense as their feelings of getting along was firing up, an unexpected group came into the dining room. It was Kauki and them as well as his classmates. It appears that everyone, including Aiko, had come. When Hajime looked at them for a moment, he frowned slightly. Beforehand, he heard of the times when they would be eating. He had thought that he would be able to comfortably eat with his companions, but it appears that that plan was thrown off. There's no need to anxiously consider it. Hajime renewed his thoughts as he continued eating his meal. Yue and them didn't particularly mind either, but it doesn't appear that his classmates thought the same. Some people thought it was rather interesting, some people felt slightly awkward, and some people were lost as to what to do and became restless. Although they frequently glanced over, they were reminded of Hajime's previous statement that he didn't see them as companions and much less held much interest in it, so they were hesitant to call out to him. By the way, Aiko was staring at Hajime for a different kind of reason.
Ah, Shizuku-chan. Over here. Kaori, can I sit next to you? Of course.
Kaori was showing a friendly smile with Nointo's cool face. Shizuku also naturally loosened her cheeks as she sat next to her. At first, it was still hard for the classmates to accept the fact that Kaori had changed her body, but the atmosphere of Kaori's image and smile allowed them to loosen up. Even if her body has changed, Kaori's peaceful atmosphere allowed her classmates' hearts to relax. Or rather, when compared to the time when Hajime lost his cool, it was only slightly nerve-wracking. There were many classmates who were glad that Kaori had returned. When Shizuku sat on the seat, Kuki sat on the seat next to her, and Aiko sat on the opposite side, while Suzu sat next to Aiko. Aiko was right next to Yue. The other classmates proceeded to sit on the other remaining seats. Suzu looked at Yue as she sat.
Excuse me for sitting besides Wanisa,
she said with a strangely tensed expression. Yue said,
Why Onisa?
While tilting her head. When Kuki and them took their seats, the excellent maids of the royal palace began to move together and set the table. It was practically the same menu that Hajime and them had. Then, at that time, over Yue's head, Hajime and Aiko's glances connected. At once, Aiko's cheeks were lightly stained. She shamefully averted her eyes. Even still, she'd fragrantly glance back at Hajime and secretly whispered out in a Gaiet voice.
Ano, Nagumo-kun, Sono that thing from a while ago. Sono if possible.
Having to talk over Yue caused her to be a bit uncomfortable, most likely. As an adult, and as a teacher, it was shameful to ask of Hajime, so she kept quiet and decided to not say it. Hajime guessed that Yue had decided to not mind it, and he thanked her within himself while looking at Aiko. Suddenly her body was shaken and Aiko's ears began to be dyed as well. There was a feeling that it was too late now that their eyes had matched up. Shizuku and them paid attention to Aiko's appearance as she stared at Hajime. Fortunately, it was a blind spot for the other students, so they weren't found out, but the relatively close Frontlines group classmates saw it
and were rather suspicious. About what, Sensei? Was there something?
Fu-i?
Naturally, Hajime had decided to pretend not to know anything. Aiko was momentarily dimmed by that attitude, but she guessed that he was willing to keep it a secret. With a wry smile, "No, it's nothing vertical bar," she answered. Although she was thinking that she was cowardly for having Hajime take care of it, she became happy and smiled because he was considerate. When they saw Aiko's state more and more, the females began to turn their eyes onto Hajime. Only Yue was comforting Hajime by patting his shoulder. In addition, vertical bar and vertical bar as well. As expected of the true heroine, she was clearly different from the recent violent heroines of today. I was absorbed in my deep thoughts. As expected, Yue is the best lover. I don't know how many times I've fallen for her again. Shia, who sat on his opposite side, began to tug on his sleeve.
Hajime-san. Guess.
It appears that rather than getting angry that her rivals in love seems to have increased, she judged that now seems to be the time for her to show her appeal. While blushing and glancing upwards, she gracefully presented a fork. At that point, she didn't forget to also gayatly draw her usami mis closer to Hajime as well. She was wonderfully cunning. Hajime had no hesitation since they'd been doing it for a while, and consumed it in a bite. As Hajime chewed it in his mouth, Shia's usamimis were waving as if she was happy. Incidentally, her bunny tail was also wiggling. When such a spectacle was shown, Kaori and Teo couldn't afford to stay put either. Both of them panicked and thrusted their forks into their food.
Hajime-kun, me too, on... Master, please eat mistresses without delay. Anya.
Just this once. No matter how many vertical bars a Bon vertical bar were done, if the menu was the same, then he'd get bored. That's why he gave out a warning, the 2 vertical bar amyed, as they responded to Hajime. With that, he consumed both with a bite each. Kaori and Teo both had soft and warm expressions.
What's with this atmosphere? It's very uncomfortable.
Shizuku's cheeks cramped up as a pink barrier surrounded Hajime. Kaupi and Ryutaro, who was next to her, and Suzu, also felt uncomfortable. Only Aiko had thought for a moment if she should also do it. While she was scolding herself for thinking about it, everyone else were already through with it. The other schoolgirls had an awkward air around them, as the sweet air dispersed, as they stared at Hajime, and then they began to heya-keya and make a ruckus. The eyes which seemed to have looked at Hajime, containing slight fears, was now converted into a love story almost immediately. Since that day when he fell into hell, who would have thought that he would become the owner of this kind of harem? The girl's eyes shined with curiosity and watched Hajime. On one side, the boys had slight fears, like the girls, but it turned into awe as they paid attention. However, there were also glares of jealousy and envy which burned brightly that appeared here and there. After all, Hajime was surrounded by beautiful women, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call them peerless beauties. Many eyes gazed on Shia in particular. As expected, even if they didn't have a geeky hobby, a girl with usamimis accurately tickled the heart of a man. Furthermore, the present Shia had a lovely smile. As she was next to Hajime, occasionally, her usamimis that moved around had extremely destructive powers. But, no matter how much they were consumed by jealousy and envy, would they get to know the secret to happily get along with beauties in a different world if they asked? But they couldn't say it. Once before, they called Hajime incompetent, so they kept to themselves gayatly. His overwhelming strength and unique atmosphere he carried now was enough to make them lose their nerves. Hajime was lightly ignoring his classmates' stares, however. For some reason, Kaori, who he saw at the edge of his view, was blushing while holding a fork. Kaori had allowed her eyes to swim around a bit and seems to have come to a conclusion about something. She apologetically used her fork to eat up the rest of her dish, and she blushed once again. Instinctively, is it puberty? I was tempted to tsukomi, but before I could, Yue's severe tsukomi came out. At the same time that Kaori, who noticed that Yue was gayatly watching her and aligned their eyes, those words came out.
Hente, and a...
That's wrong. What are you saying? I'm only eating as usual.
Is what you say? But you're thoroughly enjoying Hajime's taste.
A, am not. B, besides, if you're saying such things, then Teo is the real hentai, right? Look, she's magnificently licking the fork.
Kaori refuted Yue with a bright red face. Dash Bishi, and pointed at Teo. Up ahead of that was Teo, who was licking and savoring a normal fork with a blank look. That's right, are there any problems? Is what her expression was like. Teo was holding the fork in her mouth like nothing was wrong. She was clearly enjoying something else. She was a huge M hentai, but it appears that she somehow evolved into a anything goes hentai somewhere along the line.
Teo, stop that immediately, or I'll send you flying.
Moo! I guess there's no other way. Master still hasn't kissed Mistress yet. If I don't.
Hajime's temple twitched more because, for some odd reason, he was criticized back. Then, at that time, Teo suddenly recalled something and her eyes started shining.
That's right. Master, I haven't received my reward yet. Mistress desires the promised reward.
Reward? Towards Teo's words. For a moment, Hajime was thinking, "What are you talking about?" as he frowned. Then, he immediately recalled and clicked his tongue. The people who didn't know what they were talking about tilted their heads as the representative Shia asked.
What do you guys mean by reward?
Umu, at the head temple where Sensei Dono was entrusted to me, I was promised that I would be rewarded if I kept her safe until the end. Nufufufu, Master. You're not thinking about going back on your promise, right?
Shia and Kaori both, that's sly, and made a ruckus. Teo urged that the promise be kept while laughing heartily. Somehow or another, everyone's attention were gathering. Hajime had an unpleased look as he turned towards Teo. And what's your wish? Though I'll say it first, I'll only do what's within my range, all right? Implying that just like the time with Shia's reward, requests like hold me won't be allowed, Teo also seems to have guessed his intentions, and she nodded exaggeratedly that she understood it. And while blushing and fidgeting, she said her demand.
Be relieved, I won't be asking anything unreasonable. It's just like when we first met. I want you to tease Mistress's ass.
With both hands on her cheeks. Kea, I said it! Teo seemed to be implying as she shivered with delight. Because it's already been done once, it wouldn't be unreasonable, and completely disregarded the abnormality of the contents as she asked for an unreasonable demand. As expected of a hentai. Sure enough, all humans other than you and them were intensely shocked by those remarks. Their eyes turned towards Hajime. It was the same eyes as if looking at a criminal. Rejected, this worthless dragon. Don't go saying remarks that remarkably invite misunderstandings. Towards Hajime, who plainly rejected the demand, Teo made an expression as if she was shocked and intensely protested.
Why? It shouldn't have been an unreasonable demand. Just like at that time, I just want you to thrust your thick and hard black rod into Mistress's ass, just like that time when you were always grinding up and quickly pulling it out while ignoring Mistress's pleas. I want you to relentlessly torment Mistress's ass.
I've already said it. Quit saying remarks that invite misunderstandings. The gazes being directed at Hajime turned into eyes as if looking at a devil.
But it's not a complete misunderstanding, right?
Yue and them, odd. Aiko, who seemed to have been slightly displeased expression, called out to Hajime with thorns attached.
Certainly, you didn't say any lies.
Actually, it was stuck... Nagumo-kun was completely merciless.
The classmates' doubts changed into conviction after hearing Aiko and the I-Chan bodyguards, such as Sonobe and the others, voiced their thoughts.
Hajime! Hajime was the cause of Teo's hentai transformation. It can't be helped.
Unexpectedly, Shia and Yue had betrayed him.
Nagumo-kun, people like you, what have you done to Teo-san?
Hajime-kun, you have to take responsibility.
The gazes directed at Hajime were like eyes that were looking at a demon lord. Hajime slowly stood up without a word and stretched out his right hand upwards. In front of everyone who was wondering what he was going to do, Hajime pulled out the black stake for pile bunker out of the treasure warehouse. For some reason, the stake was already giving out red sparks as he pulled it out. Cold sweat ran down Teo's cheek. Okay, Teo, let's give you your reward. You want it rammed up your ass, right? Rejoice. It's much thicker and harder than before. It's an excellent piece which I can boast about. You won't even have time to pant. You'll die in an instant. Teo had realized, this is bad. I got too full of myself. Pile bunker being used on Teo was the results of a fight, while being viewed with eyes as if looking at a pervert, Hajime simply went berserk. By the way, if you looked objectively, it certainly wasn't a misunderstanding when pointed out.
Wait a bit, Master. What I said a while ago was only an example. I didn't say that you had to use it again. As expected, if something like that is used, I'll end up dying. I'll apologize so, quickly. Put that away.
Don't hold back, Teo. You want this right? What? Did you want to waste precious time to go to a room? I'll pierce you here?
You, Shia, Kaori, stop Master already. Help me.
As Hajime approached while gushing out sparks and crackles, Teo became teary-eyed and asked for Yue and them for help. As expected, she didn't want the punishment of dying in a single blow, but her cheeks were slightly blushed, and her breathing was rough. It seems that her performance ran deep. Hajime looked at Teo, who was clinging onto Kaori and hiding behind her, and with his upset feelings washed away, he fumed snuffled with his nose. The stake was returned into the treasure warehouse, and he returned to his seat. However, the classmates didn't lose their evaluations of him being a demon lord. Later, two kinds of names spread throughout the kingdom about the white-haired eye-patch-wearing Demon King, but if Hajime had known that he would have gone insane. And? The reward itself doesn't really matter, but don't you have a more decent demand? Hajime let out a sigh as he got back to his seat. It was a sigh of relief in various meanings. The scene where the ass of a beautiful young woman that was about to happen in front of their eyes was well over the capacity for the high school students.
You, Umu. Then, let's see, the rights of laying on the bed with you? See, it's always Yue and Shia who gets to be next to Master, right? Mistress has never slept next to Master before. That's why tonight I want to sleep next to Master. How about it?
Something of that degree is cheap, or rather, just say that from the start.
Mistress's passion surged out. It's not something I can control so easily. Accept it.
Teo, who was ashamed, was wiggling with a surprised expression when she looked at Shia, who was next to her. Shia said, "There's no helping it then, huh?" and shrugged her shoulders. It appears that, tonight, he'll be sleeping between Yue and Teo, but, while in bed, Hajime would be sandwiched by something else. The schoolgirls were making a ruckus again as they went. Kayak, kayak! And the male students were beginning to utter out some kind of curse. Additionally, Aiko, sleeping with multiple females is immoral, began to give out a teacher like, actually she probably held a lot of personal resentment, preach. On the other hand, with Shia and Yue's relation exposed, she was objecting against it now. Yue leaned on Hajime and stuck out her tongue and released her bewitching atmosphere after finishing her meal. Because of that, the classmates were further heated up, and some boys were unable to stand up straight anymore, and the dining room's atmosphere was filled with chaos. While ignoring the noisy girls' uproars, Hajime decided to recall what happened today. They free-falled from Kamiyama and appeared with Kaori, whose body was replaced. They went to the Adventurers Guild and created a gold-ranked man-woman, played a grand game of tag with the craftsmen of the kingdom, which caused great confusion, allowed the royal family to gain control of the situation, beated up the to-be king, and he also lost his first crush. In order to kill time, by chance, he met up with Aiko and she revealed her heavy worries, and while having dinner expecting to relax, it turned into a disturbance. These were the events which happened to Hajime in a day at the kingdom. It may be Hajime's fate to be a maelstrom of confusion and disturbances. Tomorrow, Hajime and them will be taking Ririana and them and leaving the kingdom. Hajime and them have no intentions of entering the Empire's capital at all. Surely, without a doubt, probably isn't possible. As expected, what really lies on the grounds towards the east, I have a premonition of the new disturbances to come, while feeling the softness and warmth of Ye, who was hugging his arm. Ma, whatever it is. He shrugged his shoulder.